Chapter 1 Intro. A man was knocked to the ground. His neck was touched with the cold chill of a sword. His blood-stained eyes filled with bottomless hatred. Standing across from him was a man wearing a black robe, a clearly extraordinary-looking man, but his slightly raised lips revealed 12,000 points of evil. The handsome man's heart was barking, "Kill him! Kill him!" But the hand holding the sword was motionless. Instead, he started rambling about the past, from how he had destroyed the man's family, strangled the man's parents and siblings, retelling all the persecutions he'd inflicted on the man these past years. "Stop talking nonsense. Kill him and talk later." The handsome man's heart let out a loud roar. When he was finally able to control himself and raise his sword, the horse was spared by him, and the woman laying to the side, who should have been on the verge of death, suddenly rose, grabbing a wicked sharp dagger and stabbing it into the middle of his back. He turned his head slowly, not daring to believe, his dark eyes filled with love, hate, and strong unwillingness. "I'm sorry," the woman choked, this long and drawn-out vengeful war finally coming to an end. But the villain's death didn't mean the end, but the beginning of everything. The handsome man who should have died was now standing in a vast sea of stars, his black robe replaced with skin-tight clothing, staring at the watch on his wrist. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a watch, but an AI. The man was called Zhou Yunsheng. Originally, he lived in the high-tech world of 2458 and was one of the top hackers. One day, when he finished a transaction on the Star Network and was about to log out, he was sucked into a different dimension called the Lord God space, by an existence similar to a black hole. There, he was loaded with the villain system, then set foot on the path of the villain, torn bodies and crushed bones, destined to die a miserable death. He obviously knew that he should not touch the male lead's woman, should not steal the male lead's treasure, should not bully the male lead's little brother, should not suppress the male lead's family, but he was under the system's control and had no choice but to do extremely stupid things, eagerly rushing down a road that only led to death. Even more frustrating, whenever he had the opportunity to stab, slash, or shoot to get rid of the male lead, the system would input a large paragraph of dialogue for him to read. After that, he realized there would always be someone silently waiting behind him, ready to stab him with a knife. It was inevitable. Zhou Yunsheng looked handsome, even when he wasn't smiling. His mouth always had a slight upward tilt, showing that he should be a gentleman. However, he was in fact the opposite. He was insidious, good at disguises, and his desire for control was very intense. A person who usually threatened the network as a plaything became a system pawn. That kind of huge psychological gap stirred up the ruthlessness hidden in the depths of his heart. He wanted vengeance on the Lord God. If he was an ordinary person, maybe he would search for clues in each traversal, or cooperate with the system, slowly enhancing his strength, then probing out the Lord God's origin, attempting to destroy it. However, Zhou Yunsheng was a hacker. No one knew the essence of data better than hackers. If it could be the world's most orderly, most exact, most stable machine, it could also be the most chaotic, most out of control, the most vulnerable existence. And in this virtual world, the omnipotent Lord God was actually just a set of data. If you wanted to destroy it, maybe you didn't need overwhelming power. You only needed a snippet of modeling code, commonly known as a virus. From the beginning, Zhou Yunsheng intended to turn himself into a virus, one that existed within the Lord God system, so that it couldn't detect, couldn't control, and more importantly, couldn't eliminate the virus. Compared to the Lord God's huge CPU, he was just a string of insignificant code. But this code could cause permanent damage to wherever it flowed. One day, these injuries would overlap, become significant enough to paralyze the Lord God system. Then, when the time came, no matter how, he would be able to return to the real world, alive, everything he went through already put behind him. He was looking forward to that prospect, very satisfied. Now, Zhou Yunsheng was fiddling with the eye on his wrist. It was a gift from the Lord God, the villain system. The system had its own code name, 007. Very sentimental, and its voice was also a Lolita voice, the most favorite among otaku. It was responsible for issuing the tasks assigned by the Lord God. If the task was failed, it was also responsible for issuing punishment. And when the host was disobedient, it could temporarily control their body. If necessary, the host would be obliterated. If he was an ordinary person, perhaps he would hate the system to the bone. But Zhou Yunsheng felt otherwise. The moment he received the AI, he exercised all control to suppress his heart's ecstasy and excitement. He was a hacker. Just give him a computer and he would be able to conquer the world. And so the Lord God provided him the handiest tool. After countless reincarnations, on this day, when he finally completed the villain mission, he wasn't sent back to the Lord God's pure white room. Rather, he came to this vast black sea of stars. 007 was broken through by the virus program he'd implanted, and the system that once threatened him was completely obliterated. 007 was now unable to issue tasks. It couldn't speak and it couldn't control the host's body. It became a precision instrument controlled by the host. Zhou Yunsheng stretched out his fingertips, slowly debugging the AI. His twinkling eyes filled with delight. The vast galaxy in front of him was a secret space created by 007. He would evade the Lord God's omnipresent monitoring. Here it was very safe, very charming. It was his shelter. He wandered through the galaxy, held a bright star in front of himself to observe, then gently put it back. The seemingly vast expanse of universe was in reality a place where anything could be reached with a thought. The so-called powerful didn't mean physical strength, but spiritual. Zhou Yunsheng laughed quietly. He placed his fingertips on his wrist and immediately disappeared into the sea of stars. He couldn't wait to pollute the Lord God's perfect world. First arc, Slapping the Business Giant. Chapter 1. He opened his eyes once again. Zhou Yunsheng found himself lying on a soft, king-sized bed. Above his head was a snow-white ceiling and a gorgeous crystal lamp. He half sat up and found that the AI, which was bound to his soul, was now quietly encircling his wrist. Uninterrupted writing emerged on the display. It was a detailed data about his new body, stolen from the Lord God system. In order to conduct himself as a virus capable of evading the Lord God's monitoring, Zhou Yunsheng naturally would attach himself to the main players in the dimension. In other words, the male and female protagonists. As accurately calculated by 007, his best choice was to become data that would be destroyed sooner or later, commonly known as cannon fodder. Changing the fate of cannon fodder, although it wouldn't lead to the collapse of the dimension, it would cause an error in the Lord God's calculations. One data error could give rise to a series of data errors. After he leaves, the world would already be out of the Lord God's control, like in the gray area of a brain. Although it looked okay, it was actually already necrotic, and the more the gray area multiplied, the brain would sooner or later be paralyzed. This was the result Zhou Yunsheng ultimately wanted. After reading the information, the corner of his mouth raised slightly as he ruminated. This body was 16 years old, also called Zhou Yunsheng, and he was the Zhou group's first son. He was a first-year student and had two younger brothers in third year of middle school, both 15 years old. One called Zhou Wen'ang and the other was called Zhou Wenjing. On the surface, Zhou Wen'ang was Zhou Yuncheng's full sibling, but in reality he was a child from his father's mistress' true love, substituted into the family during his mother's postnatal weakness. Zhou Yuncheng's real brother died at birth because of hypoplasia of the heart. On the other hand, Zhou Wenjing was born from the female university student who was sponsored by Zhou's mother. That woman was an orphan and she was kind-hearted. Racked with guilt over Zhou's mother, she fell into depression soon after she gave birth and slit her wrists and committed suicide a few years later. The body was discovered by Zhou's mother. It's unknown whether this stimulated her, but a year later she jumped into the sea, her dead body unrecoverable. The protagonist of this world was Zhou family's second son, Zhou Wenjing. He was suppressed by the family from childhood and persecuted by his brothers. Then he finally counterattacked and became a business emperor. He defeated countless opponents, experienced one thrilling trade war after another, then finally ascended to the pinnacle of power and wealth. As for Zhou Yunsheng, he was merely another small stumbling block in his life's path. He couldn't even be called an opponent. Of Zhou family's three sons, the first was calm and sophisticated, the second was eccentric, and the third was simple and straightforward. However, the first son, who looked the most outstanding and shrewd, was in reality the most stupid. He treated Zhou Wen'ang as a full-blooded younger brother, taking care of him to the point of stupidity. He even bullied Zhou Wenjing under the others' instigation, and the obviously partial Zhou father didn't interfere. Under Zhou father's deliberate guidance, he became a defensive shield for Zhou Wen'ang. In the end, he not only had to bear Zhou Wenjing's revenge, even his share of the family property was stolen by Zhou Wen'ang. He was destitute for all his life and died miserable. This was simply a standard canon for the role. After reading the information, Zhou Yunsheng lazily stretched his waist, then walked to the huge French window to bask in the morning sun. His more accurate than 007 brain was rapidly calculating how best to change the fate of the original owner. Since he was here, he would seriously face life, not treating it as an imaginary world and not treating it irrelevant like a game. This was a world created by the Lord God. It was an aggregate of countless data, different from a heterodimensional space in the real world. However, he was also a string of data, more specifically the codified creation of a soul. So to him, the world feels no different from the real thing. The heartache born of the anger of betrayal and the pain of being killed again and again, they were not inferior to the real world. In fact, because the memories were deeply rooted in his soul, they were even more profound than reality. He didn't want to be a puppet for the Lord God to fiddle with again. Since he was here, he would do everything in his ability to subvert fate and live for himself. At this moment, the sun hid behind the clouds, and the smooth glass windows reflected the teenager's handsome, determined face. Sheng Xiao, breakfast is ready, time to get up. Just then, the nanny knocked on the door. Zhou Yunsheng put away his determined spirit, rehung a gentle and an elegant smile, then followed the original owner's body to change into his school uniform, running downstairs for breakfast after washing up. In the dining room, Zhou's father was sitting in the main position, reading the newspapers. Zhou Wen'ang was lying on his shoulder, his neck stretched out. When he saw Zhou's father about to flip the page, he quickly pressed down the newspaper, shouting out that he wasn't done reading. Zhou's father just smiled helplessly, then lovingly pinched the tip of his son's nose. This kind of tenderness did the eldest son, Zhou Yunsheng, ever receive that? But he was brainwashed by Zhou's father to always think that the best of everything should be given to his younger brother. Taking care of his brother was his duty. Take care, huh? The current Zhou Yunsheng would naturally take good care of Zhou Wen'ang. The corner of his mouth raised up, making the smile on his face appear more gentle and sincere. Zhou Yunsheng sat on Zhou's father's left, indifferently glancing at Zhou Wenjing, whose head was lowered in thoughts only he could know. Yang Xiao, drink a glass of milk every day. Zhou's father's personal assistant, Du Shulang, came out from the kitchen and placed a cup of steaming milk in front of him, blocking his view of Zhou Wenjing. Zhou Yunsheng's smile deepened, his dark eyes flashing a sharp light. He almost forgot his current opponent in the Zhou family wasn't only the protagonist Zhou Wenjing. There was also the male supporting actor Du Zhulang. Without him, Zhou Wenjing would not have been so overwhelmingly powerful in 10 years. Basically, he was Zhou Wenjing's gold finger, his biggest cheat. Chapter 2. Because of their fine genes, Zhou family's 3 sons grew up to look pretty good. But since he was the protagonist, Zhou Wenjing naturally looked the most outstanding. His deep and flawless face was like a work of art, carefully crafted by God. No matter from which angle of observation, he was perfect. Compared to him, Zhou Yunsheng's facial features felt slightly dull, but his pair of star-like, bright peach blossom eyes made up for the gap. When he looked at someone, they wouldn't know how to feel. When he tilted his head and cast a sidelong glance, the kind of hooking and piercing gaze could flush someone's ear and pump their heart. As the protagonist, Du Shulang's appearance was almost on par with Zhou Wenjing's extremely impeccable handsome face, cut and chiseled, but his ear-length hair cut in a layered style, pair of golden-rimmed glasses, gentle mannerisms, and friendly smile covered up his strong and sharp aura, which occasionally flowed out when he wasn't paying attention. On the surface, he was an elite returnee with an innocent family background, when in fact he was at the helm of the Du clan conglomerate. Because he was childhood friends with Zhou Wenjing's mother, he intentionally returned to his home country in order to take care of his childhood friend's son. The Zhou family was also very rich. In the Sea country, it was regarded as a first-class family, but it could not be compared to the fortune of J country's Du family. A group and a conglomerate, the difference between the two worlds was the difference between heaven and earth. In J country, underworld organizations were legal, and Du family was a top-ranked Yakuza family. Their arms business covering the whole world. Such a powerful character, but now he was a personal assistant for Zhou's father. Ordered around like a nanny. Zhou Yunsheng really couldn't figure out what was going on in his mind. But because of childhood memories, perhaps Zhou Wenjing's mother was the only sunshine in his dark world, and when she died, his beam of sunshine was immortal, so he naturally shifted his affection to Zhou Wenjing. He protected Zhou Wenjing in order to protect his barely surviving slice of paradise. No matter how ridiculous these speculations were, the fact was that he was already here. Zhou Yunsheng also no longer delved into the line of thought, unhurriedly drinking his cup of milk. Zhou Yunsheng, Zhou Wenjing, and Du Shulang quietly ate breakfast. Zhou father and Zhou Wen'ang occasionally talked and laughed while they ate. The atmosphere between them was very warm and harmonious. These two were the real father and son. Everyone else was superfluous. If the previous Zhou Yunsheng had seen through this earlier, he wouldn't have reached such a tragic ending. Thinking of this, Zhou Yunsheng's mouth pulled upwards, revealing a slight mocking smile. Then he glanced sideways at Du Shulang, who was glancing at him. The juvenile, who should be gentle and handsome, suddenly exuded a very evil aura. Du Shulang was obviously stunned, his heart jumping sharply, worrying. But when he looked back, the juvenile had already looked away, concentrating on his porridge. After breakfast, Du Shulang, as usual, drove the three children to school. No matter what he thought in his heart, in front of everyone, he always treated the three children equal. But because the third son, Zhou Wen'ang, was the most lively and cheerful, it looked like they were the closest. Zhou Yunsheng nodded off as soon as he got in the car. Zhou Wenjing also remained silent. Zhou Wen'ang had no choice but to chat with Du Shulang. He was seemingly concerned about Zhou father's daily life, but in fact, he was always inquiring about corporate affairs, inadvertently or otherwise. When facing Zhou father's beloved third son, Du Shulang naturally answered truthfully, unwary. High school life was boring. The complex homework questions were a piece of cake for a high IQ hacker. Zhou Yunsheng slept through the first two classes, but was awakened by a loud noise in the third class. He opened his eyes to see snowflakes floating outside the window. It was rapidly approaching summertime. The girls had short skirts on. How could it snow? Zhou Yunsheng took a closer look and found that the snowflakes were in fact many small pieces of cut-up paper dumped from upstairs to become artificial snow. The scene was very spectacular. Now was a class break. Many students squeezed into the corridor to watch, and Zhou Yunsheng was also put out by his buddies. They pointed to the silhouette standing downstairs in the snow. All his textbooks were shredded. You and Wen'ang can finally breathe. An illegitimate child should act like an illegitimate child. But he actually wanted to fight with you and Wen'ang. He simply doesn't know his place. Zhou Yunsheng only remembered Zhou Wenjing and Zhou Wen'ang were both third-year middle school students, and also classmates. A few days ago, they had a dispute over a girl. The girl constantly shielded Zhou Wenjing, which made Zhou Wen'ang lose a lot of face. As the boss of the school, the original Zhou Yunsheng sent out orders to teach Zhou Wenjing a little lesson. Shredding books, splashing water, verbal abuse, group beatings, an endless stream of comparable pranks plagued Zhou Wenjing. Before Zhou Yunsheng took over the body, his original relationship with Zhou Wenjing had already reached an irreconcilable level. Zhou Yunsheng dropped his gaze to the stubborn figure standing perfectly straight. The other side was also looking up. Apparently coincidental. The former narrowed his eyes, then suddenly an extremely provocative smile bloomed on his face, making the latter clench his fist in hatred. If he was someone else, once they knew the future destiny, the first thing they would do was repair their relationship with the protagonist in order to hold on to the thickest tie. But Zhou Yunsheng was a very proud man. His extreme intelligence and ruthlessness never allowed him to force himself to cater to others. Attaching himself to the protagonist would change the fate of the original owner, but his fate would still be controlled by the protagonist. What was the difference between that and being the Lord God's puppet? So he never thought of sticking to Zhou Wenjing. Of course, he never thought of getting rid of Zhou Wenjing either. As the protagonist, if Zhou Wenjing was killed, the world would collapse and the Lord God might notice the data anomalies and track him down. Although this young high space could shield him from the Lord God's search, it would be very detrimental to his future plans. It would be more difficult to execute his plans, and any inattention would cause him to be found by the Lord God. A super intelligent program like the Lord God surely must have an antivirus installed. Zhou Yunsheng absolutely didn't want to test it. So his current plan of action was to change the fate of the original owner, causing data disorder that wouldn't lead to the collapse of the world. The protagonist was alive, the world was still alive. But the world was changed beyond recognition, no longer resembling the Lord God's calculated setting. Reviewing the plan in his mind, Zhou Yunsheng leisurely recovered his line of sight. When mucking about, time always moved quickly. In the blink of an eye, one day had passed. Zhou Yunsheng opened his school uniform jacket. A black tie hung loosely on his white shirt. Hands in his pocket, leisurely striding towards a business car parked by the roadside. He was already slovenly dressed, but he gave off a yippy feeling that attracted many girls to stop and watch. Sheng Shao also looks like you're a very popular boy. Do you have a girlfriend? Du Zhulang opened the door for him, his smile revealing that he was somewhat joking. Before the Lord God trapped him in this heterodimensional space, Zhou Yunsheng was a pure homosexual. He naturally didn't like women, but after being loaded into the villain system, he had no choice but to compete with the protagonist for women, and sometimes behave immorally towards women. Only God knew that in reality, even if 100 beautiful women stood naked in front of him, he wouldn't be able to get it up. Du Zhulang's teasing comments suddenly made him remember the nauseating feeling of being gang raped. His gentle smile receded and his chilling glare pierced the other man's eye. Du Zhulang had never put the two brothers Zhou Yunsheng and Zhou Wen'ang in his eyes. Especially Zhou Yunsheng, who was a downright fool, ignorantly being played by Zhou Wen'ang. With Zhou Wen'ang, but that sharp look instantly subverted his impression of Zhou Yunsheng. Those were not the eyes of a weak, naively trusting youth. However, before he could focus on that thought, Zhou Yunsheng lowered his eyes and said faintly, "Go, you don't have to wait. Wenang's last class is PE. They were dismissed 20 minutes early." Du Zhulang nodded, started the car, and left. When he approached a dark alley, Zhou Yunsheng suddenly said, "Stop here, I have some business to take care of." The car slowly pulled up to the roadside, but Zhou Yunsheng didn't get out. He just lowered the window and propped his cheek on his hand as he smiled into the dark alley. Towering skyscrapers occupied both sides of the alley. The light was blocked by the buildings. It looked very dusty. A few huge trash cans emitted strong smells, attracting many feral dogs and cats for scavenging. Suddenly, a muffled thud was heard, and a shadow crashed into a trash can. Then, pitifully laid on the ground, a feral cat that was hiding inside a trash can yowled and quickly fled. After seeing the shadow's face, Du Zhulang's eye color changed slightly. He immediately wanted to rescue the person, but his shoulder was pressed down by Zhou Yunsheng. He can't die. The boy's tone was very unhurried, but his palm secretly exerted force. Du Zhulang had no choice but to take his hand off the door handle, pretending to smile indifferently. Zhou Wenjing apparently wanted to fight back, but before he could get up, a tall man ruthlessly stomped on his back. A few young people with dyed hair of every color crowded around him, plundering all his valuables. After another spell of kicks and curses, the man walked away laughing and playing. This type of scene wasn't uncommon in the noisy, bustling city, almost unable to arouse the slightest sympathy from passerbys. As the evil mastermind, Zhou Yunsheng exposed a smile of satisfaction. Yes, these people were hired by original Zhou Yunsheng. The goal was to teach Zhou Wenjing a lesson. Although Zhou Yunsheng had received the original owner's memory, he didn't intend to abandon the plan. He not only came to enjoy the show, he also brought the protagonist's guardian angel along. Du Zhulang pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, covering the slowly condensing eyes in his gaze. The Zhou family's eldest son really wasn't afraid of death. Zhou Wenjing staggered up, but when he stopped to pick up his school bag, he almost fell over. This made Du Zhulang secretly grip the steering wheel. Zhou Wenjing tried a few times before finally picking up the school bag. Then he stood upright, spitting a mouthful of bloody spit into the trash can. His face was expressionless as he walked towards the exit. But when he caught sight of Zhou Yunsheng sitting in this car, smiling elegantly, his face instantly warped. "It's you," the voice was squeezed out between tightly clenched teeth, filled with difficult-to-conceal hatred. "Yes, it's me," Zhou Yunsheng nodded indifferently. Zhou Wenjing couldn't hold back anymore. He rushed up, wanting to push the other boy, but was ruthlessly knocked down by the suddenly opened car door. He laid on the ground, unable to get up for a long time. Zhou Yunsheng stepped out, slowly walked to his side. Then he bent slightly at the waist, looking him up and down with ridiculing eyes, like he was looking at a clown. Du Zhulang also immediately got out, wanting to prevent Yunsheng from carrying out another vicious attack. Chapter 3. Zhou Wenjing simply wanted to rip Zhou Yunsheng apart. Just as he was about to get up, he was kicked away, vomiting out a mouthful of blood. The original owner, because of Zhou Wenang's calculations, lost his identity as Zhou family's eldest son, and the family property, his life instantly fell into the pit. But the protagonist, who had already become a commercial giant, still pummeled him while he was down. Because of him, the original owner had doors slammed in his face everywhere he went, and spent a lifetime unable to find a decent job. Finally, he ended his life in depression. After receiving this body and learning the fate of the original owner, forgot about Zhou Yunsheng holding the protagonist's side. Not immediately killing him was already considered valiant self-control. If Du Zhulang hadn't pressed down his shoulder with force, he still would have walked over to kick him a few more times. Sheng Xiao, don't pointlessly bully young people. The handsome young man pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose, seemingly kindly comforting, but also seemingly warning. Zhou Yunsheng didn't mind. He brushed away the hand on his shoulders and slowly strolled to Zhou Wenjing's side. Zhou Wenjing already couldn't climb up, only able to glare at him with eyes of hatred. "Do you hate me?" Zhou Yunsheng tilted his head. In In response, Zhou Wenjing spit out bloody saliva. Zhou Yunsheng stepped sideways to avoid the then stepped on Zhou Wenjing's stomach, opening with a sneer. You actually hate me? What qualifications do you have to hate me? Without my mother's support, could your orphan mother afford to go to the best domestic university and graduate to an instant job in the Zhou clan, taking home a few hundreds of thousands annual salary? My mother treated her like her own daughter, and how did she return the favor? Climbing into her foster father's bed, giving birth to a child for her foster father, even if she chose to kill herself. Why do it with my mother's bathtub? Was she atoning for her sins or using her life to take revenge against my mother? Well, she got her wish, and my mother eventually followed in her steps, leaving me to face the world alone. I ask you, who should I hate? Zhao Yunsheng's eyes grew redder as he spoke, and had to stop to take a deep breath. His hoarse voice was filled with such strong rage and hatred, as if he wanted to destroy everything in front of him. Zhou Wenjing was frightened by his sudden outbreak of intense emotions. For a long time he dared not look him in the eyes. Du Zhulang's, who originally wanted to pull him away, heart trembled slightly. Before he came, he investigated Zhou Wenjing's situation in Zhou family. He only felt that he was pitiful, but he never looked from Zhou Yunsheng's perspective. Now he listens to his complaints and suddenly thought, right, the biggest victim was really Zhou mother. And as for this child abandoned by Zhou mother, the pain and hatred in his heart wasn't less than Zhou Wenjing. Illegitimate children are pitiful. Then what about legitimate children? Du Zhulang, another illegitimate child, had never considered this issue. The air stagnated for a moment. Zhao Yunsheng's mood also calmed down, slowly asking, You find your conscience and ask yourself, if you were in my position, how would you feel? What would I feel? Naturally hate, monstrous hate. Zhou Wenjing quietly clenched his fists, his eyes revealing a bewildered look. Zhao Yunsheng suddenly found it very boring. He removed his foot from his stomach and sneered, The person you should hate the most is not me, but Zhou Hao, Zhou father. He is the one who killed your mother. Saying this, he waved towards Du Zhulang. Let's go. He waved towards Du Zhulang. Let's go. What about Wenjing Zhao? Shao, you want to send him to the hospital? Du Zhulang worriedly inquired. He always put on a show of being a nice to everybody man, so he wasn't afraid Zhou Yunsheng would be suspicious. His skin is tough, he can't die. Zhou Yunsheng smiled faintly and glanced sideways at him. That look, one of seeing everything clearly, made Du Zhulang's breathing stutter. The car slowly pulled away, leaving behind Zhou Wenjing's bewildered and lonely figure. He still had not stopped hating Zhou Yunsheng, but his hatred for Zhou father had reached unprecedented heights. At this moment, he secretly swore, sooner or later, one day he'd destroy Zhou father and destroy Zhou family. As for Zhou Yunsheng, letting him lose everything he was proud of was enough. Du Zhulang seemed to be focusing on the road, but in fact he was unobtrusively sizing up Zhou Yunsheng out of the corner of his eyes. Right now his thoughts on the juvenile was complex. He thought he was hateful, but he always thought he was pitiful, and there was still some heart to express interest. Zheng Shao, although Jing Shao's mother, speaking up to hear, he was at a loss for words, pausing before opening. Sorry about your mother, but Jing Shao has done nothing wrong. You target him all the time, aren't you going too far? As the saying goes, don't burn any bridges. After all, he is your brother. Don't fight to the death. He'd once thought about finding someone to educate the oldest son, but now he'd completely dispelled that idea. Why bother with a basically orphaned child? Although Du clan conglomerate was very powerful, he wasn't able to find out the inside story of Zhou family. Zhou father's cover-up of the events in that year were too good. The dead child was passed off as the mistress's child and was brought back to her hometown to be quietly buried. The mistress' acting skills were pretty good. At the funeral, she cried her heart and lungs out, inconsolable, fooling everyone. Also, either her luck was no good or Zhou father's luck was too tough to overthrow his wife. But soon after the successful switch, she was diagnosed with acute leukemia, dying not a few months later. This matter was completely in top secret except for Zhou father and Zhou Wen'ang. Only Zhou Yunsheng, who had invaded the Lord God's database, knew the truth. He's done nothing wrong, so the mistakes are all mine? Zhou Yunsheng raised an eyebrow in a sneer. Du Zhulang was silent a moment, then said, "You bully Jing Shao so much, aren't you afraid he'll hate you? After all, he's also a son of the Zhou family. He's qualified to inherit the family property. It doesn't matter that he's currently being suppressed by Director Zhou. In the future, when Director Zhou backs down, it wouldn't be difficult to make trouble for you. Why make multiple enemies when you can make multiple allies?" If it was a usual day, he would never say such truthful words to Zhou Yunsheng. Don't think that's just because Zhou Yunsheng was the perfectly legitimate eldest son of the Zhou family, then he was the most qualified to inherit Zhou group. Because Zhou father might not be thinking this way. Zhou Yunsheng was not aware that he was in this situation, but as a bystander, Du Zhulang could clearly see the score. Zhou Hao's attitude towards Zhou Wen'ang was clearly different from the other two brothers, simply spoiling him endlessly. If Zhou Wen'ang was interested in becoming Zhou clan master, Zhou Hao absolutely wouldn't object. Most likely, the current Zhou Wen'ang already regarded the Zhou clan as within his grasp, and pitiful Zhou Yunsheng only regarded him as a good younger brother, not only completely off guard with him, but also extremely exploited. If Zhou Wen'ang rose to the highest position, judging by his ruthlessness, even if they were brothers, Zhou Yunsheng's days would probably not be good. Who knew when he'd be plotted against and die horribly? Thinking of this, Du Zhulang cast a glance mixed with some subtle sympathy towards Zhou Yunsheng. Looking from his perspective of the three Zhou brothers, Zhou Yunsheng was actually the most pitiful. Zhou Wenjing had him for protection, and Zhou Wen'ang had Zhou Hao. Only Zhou Yunsheng had no one to rely on, a very bleak situation. Zhou Yunsheng didn't know what was filling Du Zhulang's brain. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He chuckled for a bit before waving. "I don't intend to go after the Zhou family, so whether or not he hates me doesn't change a thing." Du Zhulang's eyes flashed slightly, following up. "You don't plan to go after the Zhou family?" "Sheng Shao, what do you mean?" "The literal meaning." Zhou Yunsheng glanced at him sideways, then looked out the window and didn't speak again. Zhou Wenjing hadn't returned to the Zhou family house until after 9 p.m. He opened the door to see Du Zhulang standing by the French window, smoking. The hair that usually lay scattered over his forehead was meticulously combed up, revealing handsome and sharp facial features. He put the cigarette out and turned to look at him. The powerful breath he involuntarily emitted made Zhou Wenjing feel some fear, but even more worship. "Uncle, I'm back." He immediately closed the door and lowered his voice. He didn't understand Du Zhulang's true identity. The other man simply stated that he was a close friend with his mother in the orphanage. They loved each other like siblings, so he specifically came back to take care of him. But judging by the other man's powerful aura and omnipotent means, Zhou Wenjing guessed he must not be an ordinary person. "How are your injuries?" Du Zhulang snuffed out the cigarette. "Once you got your message, Dr. Fang came right away. I have a cracked hand and bone. The rest is some skin trauma." Zhou Wenjing shook his casted left hand, gnashing his teeth. "Sooner or later, I'll stomp all over the Zhou family and make Zhou Yunsheng pay the price for everything today." Listening to him say he'd deal with the Zhou family, Du Zhulang felt nothing, until he heard the last sentence. Only then did he frown, but he also didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Zhou Wen'ang knocked on Zhou Yunsheng's door. "Big brother, are you the one that made someone beat up that bastard? You're really worthy of being my big brother." Zhou Wen'ang intimately embraced Zhou Yunsheng's shoulder. "Yes, I set up the fight." Zhou Yunsheng unobtrusively pulled away, walking to his desk to play with his computer. A string of code quickly appeared on the pitch-black screen, then quickly disappeared. His face reflected light and dark. "Big brother, that bastard really is such an eyesore. You should think of a way to get him to go abroad. All best if he never came back." All of the evil plots against Zhou Wenjing have always come from Zhou Wen'ang. Zhou Yunsheng just carried them out. Zhou Yunsheng put all the hatred while Zhou Wen'ang pretended to be a good man behind his back, selling Zhou Wenjing little favors. Therefore, Wenjing and Zhou Wen'ang's relationship, although it wasn't intimate, it also wasn't bad. Even when Zhou Wenjing bought out Zhou Clan in the future, Zhou Wen'ang was still a member of the board. His life was very comfortable. This was what also originally occurred. Zhou Wen'ang not only urged Zhou Yunsheng to send Zhou Wenjing abroad, he also bribed a few drug dealers to guide Zhou Wenjing to become a drug addict. If Du Zhilang had not arrived in time to force him to detoxify, Zhou Wenjing's life would have been ruined. All the retribution fell on Zhou Yunsheng, while the real villain, Zhou Wen'ang, rode the protagonist's coattails, living a lifetime of prosperity. What the hell kind of world was this? Zhou Yunsheng sneered in his heart, staring into the computer screen. He indifferently said, "You do it, I'm very busy recently." "What are you busy with?" That was the first time his brother refused him. Zhou Wen'ang couldn't help but frown. "I'm moving abroad. I've already selected a good school. I'm applying for it right now. Dad doesn't know yet. I'll tell him when the application gets through. You have to help me keep it a secret." Zhou Yunsheng hit the enter key and the computer screen showed an entrance application for A Country's Connecticut Hodge High School. It was signed to signify that the preliminary trial had been passed. He just had to wait for the final ruling a week later. Hodge High School was one of the best secondary schools in A Country. The admission requirements were very strict. It was known as a small Ivy League school. Every year, countless people applied for the school, but only a few could smoothly pass the audit. Zhou Wen'ang's eyes flashed with a touch of jealous hate, but it soon subsided. Compared to getting rid of Zhou Wenjing, he actually preferred getting rid of Zhou Yunsheng. This was good. Since he chose to leave, it saved him a lot of effort. When he came back, the Zhou family would not be sure who was in charge. Moreover, A Country's law and order wasn't good. Every year, there were always a few foreign exchange students who inexplicably went missing. Who knew if Zhou Yunsheng wouldn't become one of those unlucky ghosts?
Chapter 4. Although his heart couldn't wait for Zhou Yunsheng to swiftly leave the country, Zhou Wen'ang still had the endurance to say many words, urging him to stay, until the other side confirmed that he was already determined. Only then did he compromise, feigning helplessness. After he left, Zhou Yunsheng transferred out a file from the computer, lips hooked into a sneer. This file was actually a change of will document, signed by the mother of the original owner, Lady Zhang Ji, As a hacker, searching the network for information has always been Zhou Yunsheng's habit. Although he already knew the general direction this world would develop, he wouldn't let any hidden details slide. This change of will was found in Jiang Ji's email. It assigned all the inheritance that originally belonged to Zhou Wen'ang to the eldest son. In other words, she didn't intend to leave a single penny to the youngest son. While she was alive, Yangxi, because of Zhou's father's influence, was very partial towards the youngest son. If it was normal circumstances, she would never treat the youngest son this way. Moreover, this change of will was completely drafted a week before her death, and it was completely deleted before it was sent to the lawyer, and she jumped into the sea to commit suicide shortly after. How on earth could there be such a coincidence? Who deleted the will? Did she really commit suicide? Moreover, after her death, the lawyer still received a change of will, but it stipulated that all her property be left to the youngest son. The eldest son only received 3 villas and a few pieces of jewelry. The original owner didn't care about such an unfair inheritance distribution. He even felt that it was proper, but Yang Xi's parents felt that it was inappropriate and personally dropped by to inquire. At that time, Zhou's father gave the explanation that the eldest son would inherit Zhou clan in the future, and since the youngest son's future prospects were inferior to the eldest, it was proper to leave him his mother's legacy. Yang Xi's parents also loved the littlest grandson, so they quickly accepted this reason. After that, under Zhou's father's guidance, Zhou Yunsheng alienated his grandparents, while Zhou Wen'ang visited home to accompany them from time to time, and received many benefits from the Yang family. The original owner was confused to this extent. No wonder he died so uselessly. Zhou Yunsheng shook his head and locked the will into the computer. Sooner or later, one day, he would seize back all the original owner's things. When Zhou Wen'ang learned that Zhou Yunsheng planned to go abroad, he sped up the plan to push Zhou Wenjing out. Once the 2 roadblocks were removed, Zhou Group would be in his bag. This day, Zhou Wenjing was expelled from school for stealing a watch worth hundreds of thousands from his classmate. The victim's parents, who also had prestige, were personally running to the Zhou family house to have a long talk with Zhou's father. Zhou's father felt endless shame, and so as soon as the guests left, he ruthlessly whipped Zhou Wenjing with a leather belt, then immediately decided to send him abroad. "I didn't steal it. Zhou Yunsheng framed me. Uncle, you have to believe me." Zhou Wenjing was lying on his bed, revealing a scarred back, one hand clenched into a fist, the other hand forcefully pulling at Du Zhulang's sleeves. I know you didn't do it. Uncle believes you." Du Zhulang patted his head to appease him. After Zhou Wenjing sunk into sleep, teary-eyed, he quietly visited the other juvenile's room. He raised his hand, but didn't know when he'd come here. He believed that Zhou Wenjing was innocent, but he also believed that this wasn't planned by Zhou Yunsheng. Zhou Yunsheng liked to bully Zhou Wenjing, that was true, but whether it was fighting him or threatening him, he was always brazen, no worries or fears, not afraid of others knowing. Actions like today, framing, entrapment, ruining futures, those really weren't his style. The only person that could do something like that was the honey-mouthed, backstabbing Zhou Wen'ang. But even if it was clear in his mind, Du Zhulang didn't plan to explain it to Zhou Wenjing. His protection didn't mean that he wanted to grow him into a greenhouse flower. He wanted to let him go through storms on his own and finally grow into a towering tree. Hypocritical people like Zhou and Ang, friendly on the outside and scheming on the inside, were common on Earth. He needed to learn how to read people sooner or later. When Lu Zhulang was preparing to quietly leave, the door opened from inside. A boy appeared with his hands folded on his chest, leaning against the doorframe. "What? Have you come to fight for justice for Zhou Wenjing?" Du Zhulang shook his head. He was about to explain when he saw the boy leaning to the side to make an opening, indicating that he should talk inside. He had no choice but to walk in. "Sit down." Zhou Yunsheng pointed to the armchair next to the floor lamp. The orange halo shrouded the velvet sofa, giving off a warm feeling. "Do you mind if I smoke?" Du Zhulang crossed his slender legs and pulled out a cigarette from his suit pocket, igniting it. He'd been a big shot for a long time. He always acted without reservation, so the question was just courtesy. Moreover, the boy's room was laid out in a warm and comfortable way, making him unconsciously relaxed. "I mind." Zhu Yunsheng walked over and removed the cigarette from his mouth, throwing it into a glass of warm milk. The hissing sound seemed to be ridiculing someone. Du Zhulang froze. Since he turned 20 and took over Du conglomerate, no one dared treat him this way. He suddenly found it very interesting. Holding his forehead, he chuckled. Zhou Yunsheng didn't wish to acknowledge him. Directly sitting at his desk to fiddle with the computer, he spoke without lifting his head. "Zhou Wenjing explosion wasn't triggered by me. I know you didn't do it. I didn't come to interrogate you." Du Zhulang stopped laughing and softly explained. He just wanted to say a few words to the boy. Since the day in the dark alley, when he exposed his inner fragility, he always felt something for him, similar to compassion, and he always involuntarily paid more attention to him. Zhou Yunsheng unexpectedly glanced at him. After a moment of silence, he finally said, "Then you should know whose writing is behind this. Might as well tell you. I'm also going abroad. I plan to leave the day after tomorrow." "To where?" The man was sitting languidly, unconsciously stiffened. "To a country, like Zhou Wenjing, but I'm going to Hodge's high school." Zhou Yunsheng tapped his toe, twisting his chair around to look the other man in the face, saying meaningfully, "You should know, a country's law and order is lacking. Drugs flood the street. You should watch Zhou Wenjing closely, so he doesn't go astray under someone else's guidance." Du Zhulang's heart shook slightly. Although it wasn't obvious on the surface, he laughed. "Leaving the country? Jing Shao can only pray for more luck. What does it have to do with me? Why should I keep an eye on him?" Zhou Yunsheng didn't answer. Instead, he casually clicked the enter key, and the black and white photo slowly appeared on the computer screen. A 15-year-old girl sitting on the lawn, hugging a 4-year-old boy. The two were squinting, laughing in the muddled sunshine. Shockingly, that girl was Zhou Wenjing's dead mother, and the boy with the lovely facial features only resembled Du Zhulang. This photo instantly provoked Du Zhulang's long-ago dusty memories. That was the only time in his life he felt warmth and happiness. But everything ended when she died. "Before you were adopted by the Smith couple, you lived in Yupei orphanage, and you and Zhou Weijing's mother loved each other like siblings. They say that an older sister is like a mother. Your feelings for her must have been very deep. How could you leave your orphaned nephew to fend for himself?" Although Jun Sheng already knew everything, he didn't intend to expose all the truth, such as Du Sulang's true identity. His fake identity was an orphan from C country that a couple from A country adopted, which also made it easier to become acquainted with Zhou Weijing.
Zhou Yunsheng's reason for saying so much to Du Zhulang was to make clear his attitude of objectivity. Du Zhulang was hugely powerful. If he was interested in making things difficult for him, his situation would become more troublesome. As for the protagonist, he was still very weak. When he finally grew up, Zhou Yunsheng was confident that he would also be so strong that the other side wouldn't be able to shake him. After being reincarnated for hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, his greatest capital has long been sealed in his brilliant brain. This world's technology wasn't backward, but it also wasn't flourishing, and it absolutely couldn't be compared to his original world. Forget about the interstellar areas he had experienced through incarnation. He just needed to write a few programs, develop some softwares, and he could quickly amass a huge amount of wealth. He had wisdom, so no matter what condition he was reduced to, he'd be able to react calmly. But if his troubles and obstacles could be fewer, that was, of course, for the better. Duke Zulang stared at the photo for a long time. Then he sighed, facing the teenager before him for the first time. The boy wasn't simple if he could uncover his carefully concealed truth. The corner of Zhou Yunsheng's mouth pulled up as he looked at him mockingly, saying, "Do you remember? You two siblings always received new clothes and toys from Lady Yang every New Year. That Lady Yang was my mother, Yang Xi. He was tired of being the villain, so he decided that he'd live each new life standing at the height of morality. Although Zhou Wenjing's mother probably didn't hound Yang Xi to death, rather she was most likely murdered by Zhou Hao. Why should he tell this man? Letting him feel guilty, then back down was in his best interest." Du Xulang was truly stunned. After a long while, he hoarsely said, "I'm sorry, I forgot." He was only 5 years old at that time, and not long after he was taken in by the Du family. So his impression of Lady Yang, who he'd never seen, wasn't very profound. It may be assumed that after he left, Lady Yang continued to support his sister. She was able to leave the harsh environment of the orphanage, study in the best university in Sea Country, and get the opportunity to work for the Zhou clan. This was being graced with a new lease on life. But how did his sister pay back her benefactor? She destroyed the benefactor's family and indirectly brought about the benefactor's death. He was even more excessive. Not only did he never care about the benefactor's child, he even entertained the idea of getting rid of him to pave the way for Wenjing. Just because Wenjing told him that his sister killed herself because of Yangxi's harassment. This was indeed inverting right and wrong and biting the hand that feeds you. Du Zhulang wiped his face, not daring to entertain that line of thought. "No need to apologize. She didn't cherish you guys' gratitude. Nowadays, thankless bastards are everywhere. Who hasn't bumped into a few?" Zhou Yunsheng got up and opened the door, saying, "It's late. You should go. Don't forget to take away the glass of milk." Du Xulang forced a smile, picked up the cigarette milk, and left with heavy footsteps, tossing and turning all night long, sleepless. The Zhou family's two brothers left to go abroad, one after another, one to a small Ivy Hodge high school, the other to the aristocrat school Repentant. Not long after, Zhou father's personal assistant, Du Xulang, quit, leaving behind no traces. A year and a half later, the IT industry was thrown into a whirlwind. A company called Noah Universal Tech developed a Star Wars online game. After just 1 month of beta testing, it caught fire around the world. The sensory helmet that was
that was exclusively sold with it brought the players into an immersive, magical world, creating a new area of online games. With this game and sensory helmet, Noah Universal accumulated rapid wealth. It was listed on the NSDAQ the following year, becoming the IT industry's full potential dark horse. Because the sensory helmet's technology was too high-end, no one could reverse engineer it so far. It was unknown how many IT giants wanted to steal away the computer genius hidden behind Noah Universal, but no one could even find out who that genius was. Chapter 5. In a dark room, a thin-bodied young man was tied to the 4 pillars of a bed, from head to toe covered in sticky, greasy sweat. His eyes were deeply sunken in. His skin color revealed signs of drug abuse. He'd barely struggled through the first round of withdrawal symptoms, his eyes unfocused, staring at the bed canopy above. It's unknown what was running through his mind. Steady footsteps slowly approached. A man with an especially tall stature, wearing an iron-gray suit, opened the door and walked in. Stopping at the bedside to look over the man, his dark hair was combed back, revealing an extremely handsome face and long and narrow eyes, which occasionally flashed a daunting, dangerous light. "I'll let the nurse help you bathe." He took out a handkerchief from his suit pocket and wiped off the cold sweat on the youth's forehead. The young man licked his dry, chapped lips, saying in a hoarse voice, Uncle Jo Yun-chang set me up. I remember, I've seen that woman before. She was with Jo Yun-chang in a bar, drinking bourbon whiskey. They looked intimate. I'm sure of it. He told that woman to harm me." This youth was Zhou Wenjing, now a second-year university student. A few months ago, he got involved with a beautiful woman, but he didn't expect that woman was harboring ulterior motives. She gave him a modified cigarette. A strong drug was mixed inside. Just smoking it once could lead to addiction. Zhou Wenjing, although his nature was distrustful, also very cautious about his own safety, he happened to have a fatal weakness. That was beauty, greed. As long as it was a beautiful woman, he'd undoubtedly welcome them. When the first sign of drug addiction showed, he'd finally reacted, but it was already too late. He had no choice but to call his uncle in the faraway Jay country. Du Xulang expressionlessly threw the half-soaked handkerchief into the trash, his heart turning over in anger. This anger wasn't because he heard his nephew's accusation, but hating his undeniable disappointment. He had warned him numerous times, don't accept edible things handed to him from strangers. He even sent a few bodyguards to secretly guard him. But bodyguards weren't full-time nannies. They couldn't dig into the employees' private affairs. Zhou Wenjing chased after girls, and they couldn't intervene. He simply carted his own disaster. Du Xulang restrained his fury to wash his hand. Then he picked up the phone to inform the workers to come give his nephew a bath. Then he sat on his sofa, saying in a heavy voice, Yun-chang isn't behind this. Who else have you offended? Think about it. He had already found out who was behind it, but he didn't intend to tell his nephew. If he wasn't even clear on who were his real enemies, sooner or later he would be plotted against into becoming an unidentifiable corpse. He would guide him, if necessary, assist him, but he wouldn't personally eradicate his enemies. Back then, if he hadn't told him that his sister harassed to death by Yang Ji, resulting in her taking her own life in Yang Xi's bathtub, he wouldn't have thought about killing Zhou Yunsheng. Strong hatred was contagious. His nephew hated the Yang Xi mother and son to the bone, so he didn't pay any attention to it, only wholeheartedly decided deciding to help him get revenge. If he wasn't awakened by Zhou Yunsheng's condemnation, he would have almost become a vile person who bit the hand that fed him. Since then, his trust in his nephew's words had greatly reduced. If it's not him, then who? Who else would profit from killing me? Zhou Wenjing's thin face was filled with resentment and unwillingness. He was already aware of his uncle's growing favorable impression of Zhou Yunsheng, and also his inexplicable concern. Once, when he walked past his uncle's bedside cabinet, he found many photos of Zhou Yunsheng. From the perspective, each one was sneakily shot, beautiful aesthetics and vivid facial features. Zhou Yunsheng, although he wasn't as handsome as himself, his slightly feminine facial features had a strange appeal, especially his pair of clear eyes, like a moon reflected in water. When he just slightly glanced towards the camera, the heart would beat out of control. The corners of that glancing photo had some wear and tear, which showed how much the collector couldn't put it down. If it weren't for himself, Zhou Wenjing believed that his uncle would frame and mount up the photo, covering the whole wall. He didn't understand where this kind of concern came from. Was it because his mother sent a few clothes and toys to him when he was a child? Uncle left the orphanage when he was 5 years old. How much of his grace could she get? Even if she sponsored his mother used her life to pay off all she owed. Was that not enough? Yes, Zhou Wenjing finally realized. Zhou Yunsheng's mother didn't hound his mother to death. Rather, his mother hounded Zhou Yunsheng's mother to death. At first, he thought that his mother cut her wrists in Yang Xi's bath tube to retaliate against her, until that day in the dark alley with Zhou Yunsheng, when he rained curses on him. He understood that his mother was so kind-hearted. Her heart was certainly filled with guilt for Yang Xi. She chose to cool herself in Yang Xi's bathtub to tell her, "All I owe, I give back to you." But her idea was too simple and too ignorant. She didn't expect that her death would indirectly lead to Yang Xi's death. After that, they forced their children on the road of hatred, until their relationship could no longer be fixed. Even if he was willing to make up with Zhou Yunsheng would never accept him. Tu Xulang frowned, quite dissatisfied with his nephew's extreme pig-headedness, saying in a low voice, "You can doubt anyone except for Yunsheng. Who else would benefit? Don't tell me you can't think about it." Yunsheng? When did even the way he called him become so intimate? Zhou Wenjing's face revealed difficult to conceal jealous hatred. But when he saw his uncle's sharp and cold look, he seriously thought about it and could only think of Zhou Wen'ang. No, not Zhou Wen'ang. He was the only person in Zhou family who showed him goodwill. He would secretly send medicine when he was injured, secretly celebrate his birthday, secretly accompany him to sweep his mother's grave. How could it be him? Father already said that since he'd inherited Jiang Xi's legacy, Zhou Group couldn't go to him. They had no conflict of interest. Why would he harm him? Zhou Wenjing shook his head to deny the idea. Strenuously thinking in circles, he still felt that Zhou Yunsheng was the black hand behind the scenes. Duke Xulang saw that he had no revelation. Too lazy to speak, he waited for the car worker to come up and return to his study. Then he initiated a video call. "What do you need?" On the screen, a lazy-looking, handsome face appeared. Because he'd stayed up late into the night, his eyes were a little flushed. "You're still programming? It's already past 2. Time to sleep." Du Xulang stared at his watch. His seemingly dull tone hid his deep concerns. "Sleeping now." Zhou Yunsheng looked up, dropping a few drops of eye drops to ease his dry eyes. The youth wiped off the overflow of water droplets. He narrowed his glittering eyes slightly, moving the hearts and soul of man, making Duke Sulang's breathing pause briefly. Feigning effortlessness, he leaned back in his chair, crossed his slender legs, waiting for his breathing and heartbeat to smooth out before opening. Wenjing is currently being detoxified. Do you know an Elsa? Elsa was the woman who lured Zhou Wenjing into taking the drugs. Zhou Yunsheng immediately laughed. He'll die on a woman's belly sooner or later. Saying this, he picked a steaming cup of milk off the table and drained it in one gulp. Licking his lips, he continued, I know her. A few months ago, she tried to offer me a modified cigarette. You know that my nose has always been spiritual, so I refused. With 007 in hand, Zhou Yunsheng could fully adjust his physical data, such as enhancing the five senses, strength, spiritual power, and so on. But he'd adjusted his body according to the world's tolerance limits. It was good enough to surpass an ordinary person. He wouldn't make himself so strong that it defied the natural order, because that could cause the world to collapse. Before Elsa's cigarette had even been handed to him, he'd already smelled the pungent scent of drugs. Duke Sulang had barely exhaled a breath of relief when the person on the other end of the video call said, Don't you have people constantly watching me? You should be clear on all the facts. I won't harm your nephew. You can relax. How could I be monitoring you? My hand can't stretch so far. Duke Sulang's pupils contracted, but his face gave nothing away. He was still using a fake identity. Even Zhou Wenjing didn't know that his uncle was at the helm of Du conglomerate. He only thought that after he resigned, he'd gone to J country and joined some company and was currently working as middle management. He had a little money but no power. There is no place in this world where your hand cannot reach Duke Sulang. Look, Zhou Yunsheng dug out a photo from a drawer, bringing it before the camera. This was the sole photo of the Du clan head captured by the media. By chance, the heavy layer of bodyguards had separated, but the lens was very far away, so only the profile view was captured, and it was very vague. Not to mention others, even Duke Sulang himself may not recognize who it was. So this picture, after it was leaked, wasn't blocked by Du conglomerate. Who wouldn't think that this Duke Sulang, the previously fabricated alias, was also J Country's Du Sulang? Only one character difference, the closest fact to the truth, yet no one doubted. Patriarch Du, have you played around enough these few years? Zhou Yunsheng put down the photo and raised his eyebrows slightly. Duke Sulang gave a final struggle. That photo is so blurry, how can you be so sure that person is me? I forgot to tell you, our company has just developed an identification software. Forget about a profile view, even if it was a picture of the back of the head. We can distinguish the true identity of the person according to bone structure, height, weight, gait, and other factors. Currently, A country's defense department is preparing to purchase the software at a high price in order to track terrorists. How about I give you the demonstration? Zhou Yunsheng picked up the scanner and was preparing to scan the photo in the computer to contrast it with the real Duke Sulang. He knew that his relationship with Noah Universal could never be concealed from the omnipotent Duke Sulang. He'd never bothered to hide it from him. You don't have to. I'm Duke Sulang. Duke Sulang laughed helplessly and asked, When did you find out? He was aware of his identity, but still calmly interacted with him like this. Inexplicably, this made him feel quite cheerful. Almost 2 years. You wanted to play with me, so I played along. Are you satisfied? So Zhao Yuncheng moved his hand to turn off the video. Don't log off yet. I have something to tell you. Du Sulang unconsciously leaned forward, staring into the camera. He earnestly said, I'm not monitoring you, nor am I doubting you. Rather, I'm trying to protect you. How much trouble do you think I've blocked for you these past few years? 2 days ago, your bodyguard caught a mugger who was planning to rob you. He had a gun with a bullet already loaded. Do you know what this means? Zhu Yunsheng pulled back his hand, sneering. Someone wants my life? Who? Don't you already know? Du Sulang pulled out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. The smoke blurred the coldness in his eyes. Zhou Yunsheng's company was growing bigger and bigger. He inevitably offended some people. But the one that truly wanted his life was only Zhou Wen'ang. He pondered for a moment, understanding streaking across his eyes. Du Sulang spit out a mouthful of smoke, softly suggesting, Go back home, back to sea country. There he should not brazenly move against you. With your grandparents and uncles watching over you, at least be safer than being abroad. In a few years, I'm afraid that the Zhou family won't have a place for you to stand. It's your family property. No one is qualified to fight with you for it. Even Zhou Wenjing is not qualified? Zhou Yunsheng subconsciously asked. Wenjing is also not qualified. Du Sulang nodded certainly. Maybe because of compensation. Perhaps out of sympathy, the original Du Sulang believed that the Zhou family belonged to Wenjing. But now he changed his mind. He could help Wenjing open his own business, but Zhou family needed to belong to Yunsheng. He was the Zhou group's true, logical successor. Moreover, he felt that the relationship between the two Zhou brothers was very strange. The Zhou family were just ordinary businessmen, not a Yakuza family like Du clan. Competing for family property didn't have to end in bloodshed and loss of life. If Zhou Wen'ang won, he could just kick his brothers out of the house. Why reach the stage of fighting to the last breath? The one he should hate was Wenjing, but he was contrarily even more cruel with his own older brother. This didn't make sense. Duke Sulang had investigated the two brothers from small to big. Zhou Yunsheng was always caring and considerate to Zhou Wen'ang. There were no traces of hostility. He couldn't understand why Zhou Wen'ang hated Zhou Yunsheng to such a murderous extent. Still pondering, he couldn't help but ask his concern out loud. Why? Because Zhou Wen'ang's name was ill-begotten, and if Zhou Yunsheng someday found out the truth, he would lose everything he now had. Even if Zhou Yunsheng couldn't bear to attack him, Yang Xi's parents would make him die a miserable death. Although Yang Group was smaller in scale than Zhou clan, their background was extremely complex and their industries stretched across black, white, and gray. Yang Xi's parents and her siblings were ruthless characters and ferocious protective. They doted on Zhou Wen'ang now, but if the truth was revealed, they'd immediately hate him to death. Zhou Yunsheng was a knife hanging over Zhou Wen'ang's head. A thorn stuck to his heart. Only when Zhou Yunsheng was eliminated could he really breathe a sigh of relief. And Zhao father probably felt the same, or he wouldn't instigate his eldest son to alienate the Yang family. In that brief time, Zhou Yunsheng thought a lot, but he didn't intend to explain to Du Sulang. While undressing, he sneered, You've already done too much. I can solve my own problems. If he wants Zhou clan, he can have it. It has never entered my eye. One day, Minor Universal will crush the Zhou clan. Tossing away his clothes, he fluffed his hair and went straight to the bathroom for a bath, even forgetting to turn off the camera. The young boy had already grown into an incomparably handsome young man, because he traps himself in his room for long periods of time, hardly seeing the sun. His skin was almost transparently white, but his abdomen had compact muscle and graceful mermaid lines, showing that he had regular exercise. He stood up to remove his belt, revealing a flexible and powerful waist. But because his butt was very round, the trousers didn't slide down too much, hanging loosely on his hips. That lazy and casual look was very sexy. Duke Sulang was unable to take his eyes off him. When the young man moved out of the camera's frame, he even stuck out his neck, trying to follow his figure. The young man quickly took a bath and came out with a towel hanging on his waist. His straight and slender legs once again attracted Du Sulang's attention. The young man didn't seem to notice Du Sulang's strange expression and rigid posture. He just said good night and turned off the video. The charming scene disappeared. Du Sulang slowly let out a shaky breath, supporting his forehead on his hand. He let out a bitter laugh. He seemed to be being seduced, but the tragedy was the other side completely wasn't conscious of it. Zhou Yunsheng really wasn't conscious of it. As soon as he turned off the camera, his lips hooked into a slight smile. He was a gay man with very high standards. Du Sulang was bisexual and had the best quality appearance and figure. Zhou Yunsheng hadn't reached a point where he could refuse to eat the best quality goods and seek out inferior goods. As for how to deal with the aftermath after the meal, he hadn't considered it yet. He'd had enough of being the system's puppet. He now just wanted to live according to his own feelings. I got. Chapter 6. Zhou Yunsheng thought that the two of them would quickly go to the next stage once attraction was established. Hook up. But Duke Sulang's ideas were clearly beyond his expectations. The other man seemed to be earnestly pursuing him. A phone call every couple of days evolved into a couple of calls a day. When he visited a country, he always took him out to dinner, but it was always a simple meal, and he always maintained an attractive but not overly explicit attitude. Every New Year's festival, he'd send expensive gifts. Zhou Yunsheng had no choice but to shamelessly think Duke Sulang was pursuing him, and his attitude was very serious. This feeling to him, who suffered miserable death and was hated as a villain by male and female protagonists from start to finish, was undoubtedly novel. He died an unsightly death in each lifetime. He failed to obtain true love in each lifetime. He suffered betrayal in each lifetime. Zhou Yunsheng thought that he had already grown numb to love. But after breaking free of the system's shackles, he found he had only buried the desire deep in his heart. Since Du Sulang was determined, he would also go with the flow. As for whether the two of them could last, that was another topic. While he was thinking, the phone on the table rang. Sure enough, a man's low, magnetic voice came out from the other end. "Did you like the watch I sent? I also bought the same style. It's a good match." J Country Capital. Duke Sulang was standing on the top floor of a skyscraper while talking affectionately on the phone. He smoked in satisfaction. The other side must have said something amusing because he chuckled, eyes flashing in a happy light. "Yes, I know. I'll see you next week. You choose the place." He caught sight of his nephew walking in without knocking. Duke Sulang frowned and had no choice but to end the call. Liu Wenjing sized him up inconspicuously, very curious about what type of person could let his uncle be so gentle. "Uncle, did you find me an aunt?" he joked probingly.
Du Sulang was clearly pleased by the word aunt. He chuckled for a while before nodding. Yes, I found you an aunt. Then he added in bad taste, when I wangle him, I'll introduce you guys. You must get along well. Still needs to be wangled? Zhou Wenjing was secretly relieved. Evidently promising, he had already learned Du Sulang's true identity. The first feeling was incredulity. The second feeling was pleasant surprise, and then fear. It took a year or two to adapt and gradually restore their original natural casual relationship. Under Du Shulang's protection, he founded his own company, and it was now on the rise. His prospects were broad. He was no longer the originally easily bullied illegitimate child of the Zhou family. In Jai country, even if he met a business big shot, they would respectfully shout, Jing Xiao. All of this was what Du Sulang gave him. If Du Sulang set up his own family, would he still treat this no-blood relationship nephew so wholeheartedly? Would his wife and children tolerate his presence? Zhou Wenjing's nature was mistrustful, lacking a sense of security. He was even somewhat guarded against Zhu Sulang, someone who generously invested in him. The flash in his eyes didn't escape Du Sulang's strong perception. His heart couldn't help but be disappointed. Yuncheng also knew his identity, yet his attitude hadn't changed in the slightest from the past. His nephew, although he tried hard to cover it up, still couldn't conceal the fear and fawning in his words. Before he felt that Yuncheng was inferior to his nephew, but the facts were proving that his judgment ability was lacking. Zhou Enjing was scared silly by his uncle's observation. He had no choice but to open his laptop and change topic. Today is the final day of trade war. I want to take first place to show you. Oh, already the last day? Du Sulang indeed threw away his distracting thoughts, walking over to focus on the screen. Trade War was an online game sold by Noah Universal. It was very popular among business people because of the excellent production and environment with impeccable realistic details. Many business leaders forced their children to compete in the game, using it to hone their skills. This year was Trade War's second anniversary. The game held a genuine trade war, but only allowed people under the age of 25 to participate. The war created an instant of hijink. The competition lasted 30 days. Each player could only hold 10,000 yuan in starting funds, and at the end of the countdown, the computer would select a winner according to overall quality. Simply put, the one who earned more money won. Zhu Wenjing was a loyal fan of Trade War, but also one of the expert-level players. So far, he was ranked first. This game had a huge player base around the world. Standing out from the crowd usually required extraordinary ability. Naturally, his identity was also extraordinary. Those who participated anonymously aside, real-name participants had strong backgrounds, one after another. A self-made business upstart, a conglomerate, a group, etc. Who would think that the unknown Zhou family illegitimate son could overpower the bigwigs and settle in first place? Even Zhou Wen'ang, Zhou father's praise to high heaven's son, was eliminated early on. But Zhou Yunsheng made no appearance. Perhaps he was too afraid of failure? With a strong sense of superiority, Zhou Enjing pointed to the map and explained, "The land reclamation project between Shungba Island and Clearwater Bay has been completed. This place will become an important commercial port, and the once penniless Clearwater warehouse will double in value and become the center of distribution."
When the government announced the start of the reclamation project, I already purchased Xinglong Group. The Xinglong Group holds a 20% stake in Clearwater Warehouse, so I indirectly own a controlling stake in Clearwater Warehouse. Hiking Instance Gold Miner has already been won by me. Du Sulang glanced at the data on the screen and raised an eyebrow. Your celebration seems a bit early. This person holds a 22% stake, more than you. Zhou and Jing followed along the fingertip to look at the screen, only to find that the player named Decide had released a share certificate on the communication channel. The bright red 22% stung his eye. Which hole did this Decide crawl out from? I've never seen him before. Zhou and Jing turned pale and fried. He quickly searched up the other's information and found the other side's performance was mediocre, but when his investments were added up, the results were shocking. The industries he invested in were diverse. There was food, technology, real estate, entertainment. Although there were no sudden and huge profits, the profits were steady, with no chances of loss. In just 29 days, he actually quietly accumulated huge wealth. His ranking just happened to stop at 11th place, but the network only published the movements of the top 10 players. This caused Zhou and Jing to not be alerted. Du Sulang stared at the site's transactions list and raised an eyebrow. It seems that his foresight is more long-term than yours. When the government first sent a survey team to Clearwater Bay, he had already started buying stock in Clearwater Warehouse, never making a sound, yet amazing the world with a single brilliant feat. Either don't move or one move will kill you. This really was someone's style of action. Duke Sulang smiled in interest. Zhou and Jing scorned. Even if he has 2% more than me, my Xinglong Group is based in the real estate and finance industries. It has long been in bed with the International Trade Bank. As long as I chatted with the chairman of the International Trade Bank, Simon, an NPC, the International Trade Bank will terminate all financial transactions with the site. As long as he doesn't want to go bankrupt, he'll have to give up his current shares. The business world is like this. Just because it's in your hand, it doesn't mean that it belongs to you. Duke Sulang hooked up his lips, his meaning unknown. He casually shook out some cigarettes ash. His nephew was very outstanding. His ability was also very outstanding, but he was afraid that he still wasn't Yunsheng's opponent. Zhou and Jing and the chairman of the International Trade Bank quickly reached a consensus. However, a strange change suddenly occurred. The second-ranked Shanghai Group announced their intention to compete for the Clearwater Warehouse. Shanghai Group was engaged in the shipping industry and was currently Haicheng's shipyard big shot. His real identity happened to be Li Shanghai, the great-great-grandson of the shipping tycoon Li Shisu. Shanghai Group and the International Trade Bank had strong capital ties, and Li Shanghai was the honorary vice chairman of the International Trade Bank. His intimacy with Simon was far above Zhou Wenjing. His strong involvement intensified the game to the climax. Noah Suzanne was Du Sulang's personal assistant. He always paid attention to the game's development, so when he saw his boss and his nephew through the glass window in the office, in the middle of competing, he couldn't help but come in to observe. Today's young people are so powerful, us old guys better watch out. The side, God Killer, quite a fierce name, but the strength is actually the weakest. He holds 22% of the shares, the hot potato. I'm afraid Xinglong Group and Shanghai Group will reduce him to cannon fodder. His performance has been very smooth up until now. The acquisition of Clearwater Warehouse will probably become his downfall. This shows a lack of ability to be content with what you can hold.
Although you need courage to engage in business, a calm mind is even more needed, he impartially evaluated. Zhou Wenjing nodded in agreement. Du Shulang forcibly snapped off his cigarette, giving Inur Suzanne a meaningful glance. Inur Suzanne hopped his arms around his chest, suddenly feeling a bit cold. At that moment, Zhou Yunsheng was sitting in front of his computer screen. When he saw that Lei Shenghe, as expected, had joined the fight, he immediately opened a private chat. The two people discussed in secret for a moment, then they finally reached a consensus. On the other end, Zhou Wenjing was surprised to see that the site, at the low price of 30 yuan per share, had transferred his shares to Lei Shenghe, and Lei Shenghe persuaded the International Trade Bank to let the site buy a 46% stake in his subsidiary company, Jialing Group. Henceforth, the site officially became the largest shareholder of Jialing Group and joined the main board of directors. Jialing Group was involved in the food and manufacturing industry. This development potentially was far less than Clearwater Warehouse, which was bound to become a mountain of gold and silver. But when converted, the market value was also worth at least 6 billion. When the site originally bought shares in Clearwater Warehouse stock price was very low. Even if he sold it for the low price of 30 yuan, he still earned 36 million of Lei Shenghe. The 36 million was all used to purchase Jialing Group. In other words, he bought something with 6 billion yuan, worth 6 billion yuan without spending a penny. When the announcement came out, everyone was extremely shocked, finally understanding. From the beginning, perhaps the site never had his eyes set on Clearwater Warehouse, but on Jialing Group. But he didn't directly go after it. He turned so many roads. His final plan to get Jialing Group without spending a penny. This tie a white wolf with bare hands strategy is too fearsome. Inur Suzanne pushed up the glasses that had slipped off his nose, feeling that his handsome face had been slapped soundly by the side. Zhou Wenjing endured and endured to not crush the mouse in his hand. With Du Shulang watching him from the side, he suddenly felt the pressure double, and resorted to the most despicable means. While Lei Shenghe was convening with the board of directors, he spread on the World Channel that he would buy Clearwater Sharehouse at 45 yuan per share to acquire 49.9% of the stock. Why 49.9%? Because corporations law provides that once a shareholder had more than a 50% stake in the company would enter into compulsory acquisition stage. In other words, once you owned more than 50%, whether you had the money or not, you'd have to buy the rest of the shares from the other shareholders until 100%. Otherwise, you would have to bear the corresponding legal responsibility. This provision was created in order to prevent malicious acquisition and to protect the company's interests. A comprehensive acquisition of Clearwater Warehouse would cost tens of billions. The current Jinglong Group and Shanghai Group didn't have that strength. While the acquisition was in full swing, Zhou Yunsheng saw that Lei Sheng had sent him in a private chat and let out a satisfied smile. Zhou Wenjing's shareholders slowly rose, but when victory was imminent, Li Sheng had posted in the World Channel that he would buy Clearwater Warehouse shares for 10 yuan more than Jinglong Group offer until 49.9%. The investors that were watching from the sidelines immediately flocked towards Shanghai Group. In the end, the acquisition battle ended with the fierce defeat of Jinglong Group. The countdown signs all turned zero, and the game ended. Zhou Wenjing wiped his face, pulled his hair, then suddenly smashed a mouse in his hand. The computer screen showed rapid changes. Clearly, the statistics of all the players were being summed up. The winner would be picked. Du Shulang patted his nephew's shoulder in placation, then looked towards Inua Suzanne. Who do you think won? It's certainly Lei Shenghe. He's worthy of being the great-great-grandchild of the shipping tycoon.
The student surpasses the master, Inua said confidently. No, the side one. Du Sulang pointed to the screen. The final acquisition war involved nearly 9 billion in funds. Lei Shanghai, although the market value of his shipyard is very high, his fluid funds are lacking. Where did he get 9 billion in such a short time? Borrowed? Suzanne thought of a possibility. His heart couldn't help but jump. My God, young people today are really too formidable. Seeing his twisted expression, Du Sulang laughed. Yes, the last 9 billion was borrowed. As for who lent it, see for yourself. At that moment, the stats had a new update. In his total assets column, 20% dry shares in Clearwater Warehouse suddenly appeared. Hai Cheng's biggest cake in the end. He still took a big bite out of it. His calculating turned everyone in circles. This is the real big winner. Du Sulang walked to the French window, his lowered eyes filled with wonder and infatuation. Zhou Sheng, his name seemed to be a spell. Once he got involved with him, it was difficult to disentangle himself. Incredible, just how big is this person's brain? Other people take one step and watch 10 steps ahead, but he finishes the game before it even starts. Everyone's moves were within his expectations. 100% investment success rate, long-term business foresight, and excellent ability to operate. This person is a genius. In the future, I'm afraid he'll even run neck and neck with you, boss. Emil Suzanne was in complete worship mode. Du Sulang smiled happily. Success in the virtual world doesn't represent real-world success. Zhou Wenjing pushed open the leather chair and showed out coldly, saying, Let's see if he has the ability to earn a few billion in reality. There are many geniuses. How many can make it to the top? The Zongda group he'd founded was based in the real estate and financial industry. He earned money very quickly. In just 2 years, his assets were already in the hundreds of millions, and he was only a third-year university student this year, less than 20 years old. Compared to the vast majority of young people, he was undoubtedly one of the best. His great success made his already proud nature gradually change to conceit. He couldn't accept a victory at his fingertips being snatched away by a nobody. Du Sulang stared at his hurriedly retreating back, shaking his head in disappointment. As the saying goes, there were men beyond men and heavens beyond heavens. His nephew obviously forgot this. He was indeed very outstanding in reality, very business-minded, but compared to Yun Sheng, he was still too lacking. Yun Sheng's Noah Universal had long replaced the illustrious rail technology, becoming the tech industry leader. The software he developed penetrated all walks of life, greatly facilitating people's lives and work. Mankind was unavoidably stepping into the information age. How much profit could the information industry produce? People not involved in this area could never fully imagine. Making money was just secondary. Even more dreadful was the ability to quietly dominate people's lives. Noah Universal's strength had long been able to compete with the business giants like Du Conglomerate. While he was disappointed in his nephew, Duke Sulang was also proud of his beloved. He logged into his own account for a private chat with the site. Emil Suzanne had already turned to leave when he caught sight of his boss's movements. He stood still, asking incredulously, You know the guru? Can you introduce me? He had already risen from a passerby to the site's zealous fan. Luke Sulang didn't reply, focused on the computer screen. On the other end, the handsome face that he yearned for day and night really appeared. The man was pouring a glass of red wine. The top 2 buttons of his white shirt were undone, revealing a very sexy collarbone.
Jo Yun Cheng, Inu Suzanne often helped his boss by gifts, so he naturally knew the young man. Seeing his face, he made an expression of sudden realization and complete acceptance. So young, yet extremely wealthy. Plus, he was completely self made. His talent was enough to surpass all the younger generations. In the past, Inu Suzanne's impression of the youth was only a vague excellent. But after that thrilling fight, he finally realized his power. No wonder he could let an equal opportunity leader like the boss settle down and remain chaste. Inu Suzanne pushed up his glass frames and inwardly sighed. Congratulations, Du Sulang's burning hot gaze lingered on the other man's collarbone and Adam's apple. Zhou Yunsheng smiled, raised his glass to the camera, and shook. Cheers. What wine are you drinking? Du Sulan asked, while he also opened a bottle of red wine and poured. 1929, 1992, Imperial Screaming Eagle, Cabernet Sauvignon. A selling price of 50,000 in A country's currency, equivalent to more than 30 million in C country's currency, equivalent to 59 million in J country's currency. Really living it up. Duke Sulang chuckled, then put down his glass and sighed. My wine is not as good as yours. Why don't you invite me over? Zhou Yunsheng narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then he hugged his finger towards the camera. Then come over. I'll not only invite you for a drink, you can even stay for breakfast. The young man's tone was deep and hoarse, containing implicit ambiguousness, making Du Shulang's heart jump wildly. Barely maintaining a calm attitude, he probed. Are you serious? You know what happens before breakfast, right? If I don't know, why would I ask? After chasing me for so long, you don't dare go further? The young man raised his eyebrows. His face, flushed by the wine, was stunning. If he continued restraining himself, he wasn't a man. Under Inu Suzanne's stupefied gaze, Duke Sulang, without even taking his jacket, rushed out of the office. The leather chair, shaken by his sudden departure, issued a loud bang as it fell over. From the other side of the screen, cheerful, youthful laughter could be heard.
Chapter 7. When he woke up punctually at 5 a.m., Zhou Yunsheng habitually hugged the warm body beside him. The man's hair was very messy. His profound and handsome facial features revealed a lazy look of satisfaction after rolling in the bed. His eyes, which always flickered with a dangerous light, were tightly closed at the moment, enticing Zhou Yunsheng to lean over to kiss. As a system-controlled villain that happened to be purely gay, Zhou Yunsheng's past life was very awful. He would always be forced to fall in love with someone, even initiating the most intimate contact. Whenever this happened, the system would automatically control his body. Many times when he sobered up, he'd find a heroine either cursing him or threatening to commit suicide, or perhaps intending to die with him. Ironically, even more than the other person, he was the one who actually wanted to curse, threaten to commit suicide, and take everyone along with him in death. Unable to beat looking back at his past, Zhu Yunsheng pinched the man's sexy and heroic jaw, giving him a deep kiss. Zhu Xulang already awakened the moment his lover opened his eyes, but he knew that his lover had a habit. Whenever he got up before him, he'd stare at him for a long time, then give him a deeply emotional kiss. His lover's appearance was handsome and gentle. His mouth always had a slight smile. But when you really get to know him, you find that he had a very strong character. This led to their love usually being like a battle for control, Passionate, fantastical, satisfying. Once he tasted it, he couldn't get enough. He smirked and cupped his lover's cheeks to return the kiss. He treated this relationship with unprecedented seriousness, but at first he never thought about the topic of how long the relationship would last. But with the passage of time, his lover's facial features matured, gradually blossoming a dazzling radiance, attracting his thoughts to linger on him for long periods of time. He suddenly found himself thinking that he should do something to capture him forever, frankly possessing him. Zhu Yunsheng didn't know Du Shulang's thoughts. He just felt that the other man was particularly excited today, playing around in bed for more than 2 hours before he was willing to stop. Unfortunately, his body's data was Fortunately, his body's data was improved. Otherwise, his waist would break. They took a bath together and was preparing to call for takeaway when the phone rang. Zhou Yunsheng looked at the caller ID. His brow couldn't help but rise slightly. The caller was Zhou Wan'ang. Okay, I'll head back right away. After silently listening to the phone call, he threw away the phone and began packing his bags. What's the matter? Du Zhulang felt that his lover's expression was somewhat wrong. Zhuo Han Hao is dying. They asked me to come back. Zhuo Yunsheng replied without lifting his head, but his face completely lacked the sorrow of losing a loved one. Rather, it held anticipation and mischievousness. He glanced at the eye on his wrist. The progress bar in the upper left corner had risen to 50% when he found it Noah Universal, but hadn't changed since then. But Zhou Hao's death was the starting point of the original owner's tragic life. He could only completely disrupt the world's development course by destroying this event. He stretched out his tongue to lick at his lips. Lin Shang suddenly felt it difficult to express excitement. The two packed up their bags, booked tickets, and arrived at Zhou's residence that evening. Big brother, you're back! Zhou Wen'ang briskly walked up to greet him, tightly embracing the brother he hadn't seen in many years. His eyes were flushed, tears flickering, seemingly very excited. If Du Sulang hadn't investigated the other man, he would have been cheated by his superb acting. Dad, Zhou Yunsheng pushed him aside. He looked very calm. Even his tone revealed a bit of indifference. It wasn't that he was a bad actor and couldn't pretend to be grieving. Rather, his strength was beyond his opponent's, so he was too lazy to disguise himself. Dad's upstairs. The doctor said he wouldn't make it through the night, and let me take him home. Laying in the hospital, he always felt uncomfortable. Zhou Wen'ang said as he led the two people upstairs. Seemingly unconsciously, he asked, "All right, how did Assistant Du come? Did you guys run into each other?" And before Zhou Yunsheng could reply, Du Shulang gently opened. "I didn't run into him. We're currently dating. I'm Yunsheng's boyfriend." Actually choosing to come out of the closet at his father-in-law's deathbed, Du Shulang obviously didn't intend to let his father-in-law die in peace. Why was it his father-in-law, not father-in-law? It's a Chinese. Makes more sense. Zhou Yunsheng scorned in his heart, but it was different. Indifferent eyes finally brought out a little smile, nodding in agreement. Zhou Wen'ang tripped on air and almost fell up the stairs. Fortunately, the old housekeeper that was following him along caught him. "You go, I'll wait outside." Arriving at the door, Du Shulang had no intention of going in for a visit. Zhou Yunsheng didn't think it was strange. He touched his handsome face as he strolled in. The dusky room was filled with the scent of medicine and the atmosphere of approaching death. Zhou Hao was covered in tubes, his wrinkled chest barely visible, moving up and down. "Dad, big brother, come back!" Zhou Wen'ang symbolically shouted into Zhou Father's ear. Seeing Zhou Father not respond, he almost couldn't wait to kick Zhou Yunsheng out. "Yunsheng's back?"
But when the two walked back to the door, Zhou father awoke. He said with some difficulty, Yunshen, I let you down. I let down your mother. I killed her. Dad, those things are long past. We don't blame you. Mother was depressed. It has nothing to do with you. Please feel at ease. Don't think about those sort of things. Zhou and Ang rushed towards the bedside and forcefully pinched Zhou father's hand. They say that a man's words on his deathbed were always from the heart. When Zhou father intensely insisted on calling back Zhou Yunsheng, he had a premonition that Zhou father wanted to tell Zhou Yunsheng the truth of those years. 99 steps were already taken. Seeing the final step ahead, how could he let all those years of planning fail for nothing? Zhou father was in pain. Seeing the pleading in his youngest son's eyes, he ultimately decided to bring the secret into hell. Seeing Zhou father fall asleep, not awakening from any shot, Zhou and Ang inwardly sighed in relief. Zhou Yunsheng had been standing 3 meters away as a spectator. The corner of his mouth raised in a mocking smile. Meanwhile, Zhou Wenjing rushed into the Zhou residence, inevitably shocked when he found his uncle present. I'll explain later. Do you want to go in and take a look? Zhu Lang pointed to the door with a cigarette in hand. Then he casually entered the next door study to blatantly eavesdrop. Zhou father's bedroom and study were connected together, only separated by a thin door. Sitting in the study, he could clearly hear their conversation. Zhou Wenjing hesitated for a moment, then he also went in. Zhou Yunsheng's hearing was far above ordinary people. Naturally, he heard the footsteps, but he didn't mind. Sitting in the armchair near the bedside, he casually asked, Father, why do you feel sorry for me? Is it because you murdered my mother? Zhou father suddenly opened his eyes, then he started coughing violently. Zhou Wenang suppressed his fluster with great difficulty. While helping Zhou father pat his chest, he chided, Big brother, what nonsense are you saying? Mother committed suicide. What qualifications do you have to call her mother? Are you her son? Zhou Yunsheng sunk into the chair comfortably, crossing his slender legs. Zhou Wenang's face completely distorted. The two eavesdropping next door also couldn't help but breathe heavier. The EKG machine issued a long beep. Then it eventually stopped fluctuating. Zhou's father had died of fright. But no one in the room moved. They didn't even glance in his direction. Since it came to this stage, Zhou Wenang also abandoned the pretense, slowly sitting opposite Zhou Yunsheng. He pushed back his hair, revealing a face full of hostility. How did you know? Your thumb has betrayed you, Zhou Yunsheng sneered. Your thumb has one less joint than a normal person's. It's short and really ugly. That woman had the same condition. This is an unconditionally inherited dominant gene, but my mother and Zhao Hao's hands are both normal. I don't need to explain to you what that means, right? Zhou Wenang forcefully bent his thumb. After a long time, he let out a low laugh. Even if you know, so what? You already don't have the means to take what's mine. Zhou family is already mine. Alright, you can take Yang Xi's heritage back. You can also beg Yang family to deal with me. But unfortunately, you probably don't know yet. Yang Group is currently contracted to build an undersea tunnel between Thousand Island City and Chengdu City. Zhou Group promised to inject a 2 billion investment into Yang Group. Once Zhou clan disinvest, Yang family is finished, thoroughly bankrupt. Zhou Wenang seemed to feel that his own words were very amusing, his chuckles becoming hearty belly laughs. His days of being scared witless were finally going to disappear. When the Yang Group gets destroyed, how could he not feel delighted? But Zhou Yunsheng's reaction made him feel very disappointed. The other man just sat still, like before, waiting for him to finish laughing before asking, Was it Zhou Hao who killed my mother? You guess. Zhou Wenang cleverly gave a non-answer. These years I've been abroad. Haven't you been trying to kill me? Was Elsa's poisonous cigarette prepared for me? What a pity. So Wenang smiled ambiguously. At this crucial moment, he wouldn't let the other side catch him. If he wanted to set him up and secretly record his words, there would be no opening. Zhou Yunsheng also smiled, walking over to pat Zhou Wenang's cheek. He said in a very gentle tone, "Enjoy your last festival, my dear brother." Then he pulled open the door and walked away. The two eavesdropping in the study were trying hard to digest the heavy bomb that had just dropped. Du Shulang recalled the death of a former Zhou family illegitimate child. Then he recalled how the two children almost had the same date of birth, and finally put the suspicious details together. Such a flawless scam could be seen through. Yun Shang's insight was really terrible. In the end, when did he find out? What emotions did he have at the time? His father killed his mother, his younger brother became the enemy's child. What kind of mood did he move with until today? No wonder he didn't feel a little bit of affection for Shou Hao. No wonder his attitude towards Zhou Wenang changed so drastically. Du Sulang's heartache was endless. Zhou Wenjing's face was also very ugly. He didn't expect that the person he'd been on guard against all these years was not his real enemy. That kindness, comfort, gifts, all hypocritical shows of affection. These years he was like a fool being played by Zhou Wenang's hand and Zhou father. Even on his deathbed, didn't even mention a word about him. At this moment, he deeply wished he could strangle Zhou Wenang to death, but he waited until his rage settled down before going to Zhou Yunsheng's room. The servants walked in and out, methodically preparing for the coming funeral. Your mother wasn't hounded to death by my mother. After knocking open the door, he straightforwardly said. Zhou Yunsheng raised an eyebrow. So I don't owe you anything? When he said this, Zhou Wenjing had no choice but to admit that he was relieved. His current view of Zhou Yunsheng was very complex. More than 10 years of accumulated hate couldn't be completely eliminated, but he also found him very pitiable. What do you want to say? Zhou Yunsheng patiently asked. I want to tell you, I won't take revenge against you, but I also won't help you. You have to look after yourself in the future. Because Zhou Yunsheng was too low-key, Zhou Wenjing always thought that he was just a student without economic ability. He, who was already sitting on hundreds of millions, naturally looked down on him. He could never forget Zhou Yunsheng's past bullying, but now, because of pity, he would leave him a horse. That was already the greatest kindness. The other man shouldn't ask for more. These words were also to prevent Zhou Yunsheng from shamelessly seeking to gain favor with him when his identity as the chairman of Zongda Group and the head of the Du clan's nephew was exposed in the future. He naturally believed that his uncle only came to the Zhou family house now in order to support him. Zhou Yunsheng was somewhat speechless, but Zhou Wenjing gave him a steady glance and walked away. Isn't he too conceited? What was the expression and tone? Does he think I'm a pitiful stray dog? Not kicking me while I'm down is the biggest charity? Zhou Yunsheng dragged Du Shulang's tie, forcefully tightening. Du Shulang promptly hugged his lover's waist, sincerely apologizing. It's my fault. I didn't teach him well. Baby, why don't we continue this conversation in bed? It seemed that everyone had forgotten to mourn Zhou father's death. Chapter 8 Zhou father's funeral was very grand and very hasty. After 3 days of storage, he was hurriedly buried. The day after the funeral, the lawyer read Zhou father's will. Its content shocked everyone. Zhou father left all the property under his name, including 30% of Zhou Group's shares to the youngest son, Zhou Wenang. The eldest son and the second son didn't get anything.
The second son, Zhou Wenjing, was an illegitimate child, and he had never received Zhou's father's love. It wasn't strange for him to not inherit anything. However, even the eldest son got nothing, which was very bewildering. Recalling how Zhou's mother had also given her legacy to the youngest son, the world had no choice but to sigh. This Zhou couple was really biased to the extreme. How could Zhou Yunsheng, who had no family property, live in the future? Did they not consider this problem? Mr. Zhou, please sign. The lawyer placed a thick stack of documents in front of Zhou and Ang and asked him to sign. The rest of the people could only stare helplessly. This is impossible. Zhou Hao can't have left nothing for Yunsheng. He told us he'd give Zhou clan to Yunsheng. Old Lady Yang shouted, not daring to believe. Old Gentleman Yang also stared at the completely satisfied Yang's grandson doubtfully. As in-laws, they were invited to attend the will reading. Yunsheng smiled and patted the back of his grandmother's aged hand. Although their relationship was estranged, the two elderly people hadn't lost their love for him. How is it impossible? He went abroad for 6 or 7 years and never called home. I was the only one who accompanied father, fulfilling my filial duty. I also helped take care of the company. Isn't it proper for father to leave the inheritance to me? Zhou and Ang's attitude towards the two elderly people was no longer as respectful as before. But Xi's legacy was already given to you. Your older brother doesn't have anything. How can he live in the future? Old Lady Yang still felt it was unfair. Whether he lives or dies, is it any of my concern? It's getting late. Please leave. All right, from tomorrow, I am the newly appointed chairman of Zhou clan, and I have decided to disinvest from Yang clan. I ask that you make the proper preparations. Zhou Wenang smiled insincerely as he drove them out. Bastard, what are you saying? Do you know the consequences of disinvesting from Yang clan? Do you want to force Yang clan into bankruptcy? Old Gentleman Yang asked in a sinking voice, his wrinkled face exposing difficult to conceal rage. He didn't expect the youngest grandson would turn on them so ruthlessly. Was the previous sensible feel petty fake? What debt did the Yang family owe him to actually let him plot the death of the Yang family? Zhou Enjing, who had been expressionless all along, finally exposed a smile. He knew that the old man's will didn't have anything for him. Today he came purely for the sake of watching the drama. Yang family never looked at him, and now Zhou and Ang, who they poured 20 years of love in, was attacking them. A real dog bites dog. Each gets a mouthful of fur situation. Zhou Yunsheng was very calm from beginning to end. He patted his grandfather's shoulder, smiling gently. He wants to disinvest, so let him withdraw. Grandfather, grandmother, we're leaving. But how could old gentleman Yang be willing to go? If Zhou clan disinvests, Yang clan's seabed tunnel project would have a huge shortage of funds, so the project couldn't be completed as scheduled. Even worse, it could fail. Then, not only would Yang clan's early investment of 10,000s of millions be lost, but they'd have to compensate the huge amounts of liquidated damages and bank loans. Even selling all of Yang clan's industries may not be able to fill in this hole. Zhou and Ang, this would simply send Yang family to death. Even if you back him, he won't change his mind. He wants Yang family to go bankrupt and die. Grandfather, grandmother, come with me. I'll find a way. Zhou Yunsheng was afraid that if this conversation continued, it will stimulate the two elderly people, so he forcefully took them away. You'll find a way. What can you do? Zhou Wenang and Zhou Wenjing mocked inwardly, agreeing by coincidence. Zhou's father had barely died, and Zhou clan and Yang clan's cooperation came crashing down. Zhou clan's newly appointed chairman, Zhou Wenang, announced that he would disinvest from Yang clan's seabed tunnel project for unknown reasons. Yang Clan was currently facing the biggest crisis. If not properly handled, this would sink into a desperate straits of bankruptcy and liquidation. But at this time, no one extended a helping hand. They were waiting for Yang Clan to fail so they could snatch up the seabed tunnel project that would create tens of billions in profits in the future at the lowest price. The business world was like this. For benefits, not mentioning friends, even close relatives could be sold. But what was even more surprising was that old gentleman Yang was unexpectedly very stable. When he returned home, he ate and slept like nothing was wrong, not begging everywhere for help like everyone guessed he would. Yang family's several children were also carefree. Yang Zhenhai, Hai, the current head of the Yang family's wife, even cleared out tens of millions worth of jewelry in the shopping mall. She didn't look like she lacked for money. Aya, my nephew is the chairman of Noah Universal. What do I have to worry about? You know Noah Universal, right? Ranked first in the world's top 500 companies? Lady Young stared at the huge diamond ring on her index finger. Her laughter was particularly cheerful. The salesman merely nodded, but he criticized in his heart. Of your two nephews, one inherited Zhou clan and the other turned into a penniless pauper. Why did you get the world's richest nephew? Dreaming? Yang family's reaction, although strange, Zhou Wen'ang had no choice but to ignore it. He was busy fighting off Zhou Wenjing's sniping. Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't have guessed that the illegitimate child that had previously been played around with by him was actually sitting on a multi-million-dollar net worth and would attempt to compete with him for the Zhou clan. Zhou Wenjing first released news that Zhou Wen'ang wasn't Yang Xi's son, and also implied that Zhou Hao murdered Yang Xi, seeking her heritage. Furthermore, he published a DNA comparison of Yang Xi and Zhou Wen'ang on the internet, causing the police to quickly start an investigation. After two consecutive big scandals, the world was in an uproar. After Zhou's father died, Zhou Group's stock prices declined daily. And Zhou Wenjing was taking advantage of this opportunity to wantonly buy up the shares until he became a large shareholder of Zhou Group. Zhou Yunsheng didn't make a single move. He wanted the two people to fight till death. He never planned to sue Zhou Wen'ang and fight for the family property from the beginning. He decided to leave him with nothing. As for Zhou Wenjing, the former great winner, he wanted to give him a vivid life lesson, teaching him what the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole lurking behind, meant, and what it meant to draw water with a wicker basket. The desperate heartache and misery Zhou Yunsheng experienced once wouldn't exist in this lifetime. After several months, the two Zhou brothers' intense competition reached a climax. The two were currently holding a 30% stake in Zhou clan, and all the shareholders that could be roped in and had already picked a team. To decide the victor, they needed to go after the final 15% of shares, which were unexpectedly in the hand of the two clans' hands. As early as 7 years ago, he was already a shareholder in Zhou clan, but no one noticed. Zhou and Ang had no plans to ponder over the meaning behind this head of the Zhou clan's moves. He only knew if he could persuade him to sell his shares to him or support him in the shareholders' meeting, he would be the final winner. Unfortunately, Zhou Wenjing also had the same idea as him. He'd just gotten out of the elevator when the two met in the corridor. Please come in. Do you want coffee or green tea? Ilmo Suzanne, speaking fluent Mandarin, brought the two people into the chairman's office. Coffee, green tea. The two answers completely opposed. The leather chair turned around, and a tall and vigorous man appeared, smoking a cigar. His eyes narrowed. His hair was combed back, revealing a handsome, evildoer's face. His thin lips spit out a mouthful of smoke, but it couldn't cover up the sharp light in his dark pupils. Zhou Wenjing habitually sat up straighter, and Zhou Wen'ang was so scared that he spilled his hot coffee. But what made him even more panicked wasn't Du Shulang's identity, but how Zhou Wenjing respectfully greeted him. He actually called him uncle. I see you guys have already joined I see you guys have already joined hands to deal with me. Knowing that staying any longer would just lead to his own disgrace, Zhou and Ang covered the scalded back of his hand and left, utterly discomfited. He joined hands was referring to his joint hands was referring to Zhou Wenjing, Zhou Yunsheng, Du Shulang together after all. He knew that Du Shulang was Zhou Yunsheng's boyfriend. The other side had such a big tree like Du Shulang to lean against. No wonder the two old fools in Yang family could quickly collect 2 billion in investment to fill in the holes. But Zhou Wenjing didn't know the inside story. He thought he was just talking about his uncle and himself joining hands. When he went away, he asked warmly, "Uncle, do you still want the 15% of the shares? If you don't want it, please sell it to me. Count it as cutting me a deal." Du Shulang didn't reply, instead asking in a deep voice, "Wenjing, have you never thought that Zhou clan could belong to Yunsheng?" Zhou Wenjing barely suppressed the jealous hate in his heart, pretending to laugh lightly. "Uncle, you once taught me that the business world is a battlefield. Whatever you want, you have to rely on yourself to seize it. This is the so-called natural selection, respect for the strong. If he wants Zhou clan, he can fight with me, each relying on our own skill." Du Sulang inexplicably looking out for Zhou Yunsheng made him feel a sense of crisis. Du Sulang was silent a moment, then he nodded. "You're right. Natural selection, respect for the strong. Whoever has the ability, Zhou clan will belong to them." "That means, Uncle, you'll stay on the sidelines and won't intervene?" Zhou Wenjing probed, still not relieved. "I won't intervene." Then the shares. Zhou Wenjing was somewhat pushy. He was afraid his uncle would give the shares to Zhou Yunsheng. Just because he didn't deal with Zhou Yunsheng didn't mean that he wanted to let him have an easy life. He had long sworn he'd leave the other men with nothing. I sell the 15% to you, 35 yuan per share." Nu Shulang gave the most reasonable price. Zhou Wenjing was very satisfied. He immediately took out a check and filled in the figures. Inu Suzanne sent him to the elevator door, looking at his self-satisfied face as he disappeared through the door. He quietly sighed ruefully. Silly boy, unknowingly fooled by the boss. You thought the boss not helping anyone was fair, but in fact he was just covering up his partiality. Nothing more. According to Zhou Yunsheng's acting style, if he doesn't move, then it's fine. Once he moved, it was bound to be deadly. He didn't compete for Zhou clan's shares, not because he had no ability, but because he already plans to destroy Zhou clan. This 15% share certificate would eventually become waste paper. The boss obviously knew the truth, but he didn't mention it in order to secure his lover's plan, and he also sold a stack of waste paper to his nephew for a sky-high price. Really, this is exemplary ignoring your friends after getting a new girlfriend syndrome. Ah, that's not right. It should be ignoring your friend after getting a new boyfriend. Wait, what also seems wrong, it should be hoes before bros. Finally finding a suitable idiom to describe the current situation, Inu Suzanne gave a thumbs up to his own Chinese language mastery. Chapter 9. Zhou Yunsheng was in the middle of taking a shower, when suddenly a strong body hugged him from behind. A slightly rough big palm was wandering around his waist, slowly exploring downwards. He let out a passionate moan, asking disjointedly, while enjoying the sensation, "You sold the shares to him?" "Yep," a man panted roughly, impatiently taking cities and seizing territories. He sucked and grinded on his lover's slender white nape, unable to stop. Zhou Yunsheng let out a muffled groan while he ridiculed, "Selling a pile of waste paper to your nephew at a sky-high price. You're a really good uncle. I sold it to him because I'm good to him. His whole journey has been too smooth. He needs to learn to face setbacks Otherwise, when someone else attacks, he'll most likely suffer a crushing defeat and be unable to stand up again. Zhou Yunsheng concentrated on enjoying the caresses, but too busy to answer. As the protagonist of this world, Zhou Wenjing naturally experienced significant ups and downs, but during all of them, Du Shulang and his harem were there to help him out. Du Shulang's tolerance for him could be called unprincipled. It was very strange for him to not unfeelingly watch him jump ahead into a trap that was fully aware of, even pushing him from behind. When the people around Zhou and Jing changed, it would also indirectly change the world. Zhou Yunsheng squinted at the AI on his wrist that only he could see. His lips hooking up in satisfaction. The progress bar in the upper left corner of the AI had already risen to 75%, not far from the scheduled target. While the two Zhou family brothers were fighting to the death, Zhou family's eldest son was quiet. Seeing Zhou and Jing's sudden rise to power, outsiders gasped in admiration, while also mourning the eldest son's incompetence. If the eldest son wasn't so mediocre, the Zhou group wouldn't fall into the hands of two illegitimate children. Yes, although Zhou and Jing became the new chairman, Zhou and Ang still had 30% stake in Zhou clan and was a major shareholder. Even though there was no decision-making authority, the annual dividends could let him live a comfortable and free life. Today, Zhou and Jing was preparing to hold the first shareholders meeting since he took office. All were already present. A tall and beautiful secretary handed him his speech draft, her painted bright red nails slightly scratching the back of his hand suggestively. Zhou and Jing's crotch tightened slightly, but his face wasn't obvious. He glanced at the speech and opened his mouth to speak, when the door of the conference room opened and a uniformed policeman came in. He took out some documents and solemnly said, "Good day, I'm the Section Chief of Commercial Crime Investigation Division, Xing Kuo-chan. I asked Mr. Zhou and Ang, Mr. Lin De Yi, Mr. Zhou Zhikong, Mr. Gang, Mr. Yang Ru-san, Mr. He Hong Bo, to come with me to the police station for investigation." He arrested 11 people in one breath, every major shareholder of Zhou Group. The financial affairs staff and the company account books were all taken away, and Zhou Wenjing was asked to go to the police to help the investigation. Such a big movement attracted an uproar inside and outside of the industry. The stock prices that just barely began to rise due to the successful reorganization began to fall crazily again. 24 hours later, Zhou and Jing was released, having learned that someone had hacked Zhou and Ang and Zhao Hao's computer, finding evidence of their bribery, tax evasion, money laundering, illegal financing, and other such criminal activities. The proof was anonymously mailed to the police department. Due to the huge amount of money involved in the case, the police quickly set out a task force to conduct an investigation on Zhou Group. And if these charges were established, Zhou clan would face a series of problems, such as assets freezing, delisting, huge fines, or even more gravely, bankruptcy. In order to win Zhou clan, Zhou Wenjing had invested numerous consecutive millions. If Zhou clan collapsed, the Zhongda group that he had painstakingly built up would be implicated. Once the stock fell by a large amount, billions in assets would evaporate out of thin air. Competitors would attack en masse, dividing up Zhongda group until almost nothing was left. Zhou clan wasn't a gold mine, but a muddy swamp. Once one foot was set in, it would be difficult to get out. This was Zhou Wenjing's biggest crisis since entering the business world. He felt very disoriented and even somewhat fearful. He unconsciously started his car and drove towards Du Lang's company. "Uncle, you must help me." His voice stopped abruptly, staring at the two men in front of him, astonished. They were sunk into the genuine leather sofa. Both were holding a glass of red wine, A tall man was pressed underneath a slender young man. Red wine was spilled onto the man's white shirt, resulting in the fabric clinging close to his skin, outlining his thick and broad, sturdy chest. His meticulously combed hair was now very messy, lining his incomparably handsome face, increasing his sex appeal. One of the taller man's hand was embracing the youth's flexible, powerful waist, the other hand reaching out to stabilize the wineglass. His eyes, usually flickering a dangerous light, were now filled with strong love and infatuation. The young man took a sip of wine and sealed their lips. The bright red liquid spilled along their joined lips. The scene was charming and beautiful. Joan Jing's mind was impacted by this act, struggling to ask after several minutes had passed. What is your relationship? What do you say is our relationship? Zhou Yunsheng felt some disappointment after nibbling his lover's lips. He sat upright, raised his head to drain the rest of the red wine in one gulp. Because of lust, his ridiculously attractive peach blossom eyes were now even more extraordinarily gorgeous. Zhou Jing stared at Du Zhulang, seeing him not deny anything, only possessively tightly embracing the youth. At this, everything became clear. Collapsing a gigantic business warship like Zhou Clan, there certainly must be a greater force behind it. In the end, who hated Zhou Clan to the degree of wanting to destroy it, and who could mobilize such a huge force? Before he had been thinking deeply about these two issues, but when he arrived at the office and saw the scene, the answer was already on the verge of coming out. So it's you, Shu Yuncheng. In order to take revenge, you would even sell your body? How extremely depraved. I don't know what Yang Si would think if she knew this, he ridiculed. Lu Shulang heard him use his lover's dead mother's name to stimulate him, and a layer of frost condensed on his already cold face. But Zhou Yuncheng didn't get angry. Instead, he clapped his hands and laughed as if he had heard a very amusing joke. Zhou Wenjing's rage surged up at this reaction, asking interrogatingly, "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at how much of a frock in a well you are. Put out the smoke." The last sentence was obviously for Du Zhulang, who was preparing a cigarette. Du Zhulang's hand with the lighter froze, then he naturally put it down, throwing the cigar in the trash and raising both hands in an "I surrender" gesture. The fawning attitude stung Zhou Wenjing's eyes even more. He sat up beside the two and took out a checkbook, sneering. "How much money did you sell yourself for? I'll give it to you. Don't involve my uncle." Zhou Yunsheng pursed his lips, his smile increasingly gentle. But Du Zhulang was unable to restrain his rage. He snapped, "Inuo, see Wenjing out." Inuo Suzanne, who was hiding outside the door watching the play, had no choice but to come forward. The two bodyguards were called to escort the boss's cheap nephew out. In the first place, the two had no blood relationship. Even if Zhou Wenjing's mother was a beloved childhood friend, he ran all the way to Sea Country to take care of him, then gave him money and contracts to start his own business. The boss had already invested more than enough. What qualifications did Zhou Wenjing have to intervene in the boss's emotional affairs? He really was being treated too good, becoming more and more greedy. Inu Suzanne glanced at the angry Zhou Wenjing and inwardly shaking his head. "Jing Xiao, look at this." Inu Suzanne walked him to the downstairs lounge, turned on the hall's hanging display screen. The internationally renowned TV host Lydia's glamorous face appeared, reading a long English passage with a slight French accent. Zhou Wenjing's attention was immediately captured. This was a country's most famous channel, CBS, with an exclusive interview with Noah Universal's chairman. Because he'd returned to Sea Country and was busy paying up Zhou Clan, he hadn't yet seen the broadcast. What kind of person was Noah Universal's chairman? He started off by selling small software at first. When Noah Universal was registered, it was only worth an insignificant 4,000. But in just a year and a half, it was generating 40 million in profits and was successfully listed.
Noah Group was very young. This year was just its 6th anniversary of establishment, but it had pushed aside numerous old conglomerates and steadily occupying the number one spot in the world's top 100 companies. Noah Group's chairman was extremely low-key and never appeared in the media, but this didn't prevent people from worshipping him. He was the young generation of independent entrepreneurs' idol. He created a legend that no man could break. Even the conceited Zhou Wenjing had no choice but to acknowledge the other's strength. But what did he see? He actually saw Zhou Yunsheng's face on the screen. How can this be? Mr. Saw is also the illustrious side. Lydia looked very surprised, immediately asking sharply, "You participated in your own company's competition, then won with a brilliant success? Did you get inside the data before the game? The other contestants might not find that very fair." It turns out that he was also the side. Zhou Wenjing's surprise could not increase any further. The war for the acquisition of Clearwater Warehouse was really too brilliant. After the video of the game was passed around, it was treated as a trade war textbook by business people. Every detail was repeatedly studied, then their evaluation were published. As a result, the side, because of his long-term business foresight and swift and decisive reaction in investing, was pushed into the idol altar by people. Everyone was curious about the identity of that extraordinary person. What identity did he have in reality? But in the end, he was Noah Universal's chairman. Yes, he must have gotten insider information in advance. What advanced to the point of precognition strategizing? It was all false. He was cheating. Zhou Wenjing would never willingly admit to his first crushing defeat. On the screen, Zhou Yunsheng smiled slightly. "I swear to God that I didn't get any information whatsoever. I started off like the other players. I thought that being behind Noah Group was already enough to show my strength." Lydia was rendered speechless by him, smiling in embarrassment. Yes, he was only 20 when he successfully developed Noah Universal into the colossal it was today. He led an era, changed people's lives. Just sitting there already represented his everything. As for the rest of the interview, Zhou Wenjing wasn't in the mood to listen to anymore. While he was immeasurably complacent with his first earned money, while he was proud and self-satisfied with the splendid Zongda group, Zhou Yunsheng had already long left him behind. Zhou Yunsheng was able to on equal footing with otherworldly powerful people like Du Junlang, while he was secretly delighted with just being respectfully called Jing Shao. He even thought that the other man sold his body for an insignificant shore group. He even tried to use money to humiliate him. Noah Group had annual profits of tens of billions. Even if a check worth a few millions fell to the ground, Zhou Yuncheng would probably feel too lazy to pick it up. Such a gap. It was simply a complete contrast. Zhou Wenjing didn't know how to describe his own mortified mood. Seeing Inul Suzan watching him intently with narrowed eyes, he flushed red and fled away. Chapter 10. Zhou Group ultimately went bankrupt. Such a huge business warship, an old money aristocrat family, towering for nearly 100 years, in just 2 months vanished in a puff of smoke. And Zhongda Group unavoidably received implication. The stock fell by a large amount. The Commercial Crime Investigation Division also started an investigation into it, and the competitors comprehensively sniped and suppressed. All of this was enough to make Zhou Wenjing feel hard-pressed. Zhou Yunsheng was staring at the AI on his wrist. The progress bar had risen to 99%. Because the original owner's fate changed, this world was already almost out of the Lord God's control, running an unpredictable road. There was still a 1% probability that the world might break free and return to normal, but Zhou Yunsheng wasn't worried about this. He could choose how long he stayed in this world, so there was enough time to guarantee success.
Half a month ago, CBS interview with Noah University's chairman was broadcasted on C Country's international news channel, and the true identity of the legendary figure was known to everyone. The young family that originally suffered heavy losses and almost went bankrupt quickly joined the ranks of the first-class aristocrat families in Sea Country by using the Thais east wind. Today was the head of the Guo family, Guo Li Kun's wife, Lady Guo Lin Damping's 60th birthday. As Guo family's in-laws, Yang family's head, Yang Shenhai, and his wife were also invited to attend. Of course, Guo family's main goal was to meet Zhou Yunsheng through the Yang family, who let Yang Shenhai be Zhou Yunsheng's uncle and made the relationship between the two be so close. If fate developed the way it originally did after Zhou father's death, Zhou Wenjing and Zhou Wen'ang would join hands to deal with the Yang family, and it quickly fell apart. As a result, the original Zhou Yunsheng couldn't get his uncle's protection, and his days were very miserable. But now Yang family was completely incomparably from the timeline. After Yang family suffered from the disinvestment crisis, Yang Shenhai's wife, Guo Shufang, once went back home to cry for help, but was rejected by Guo Li Kun. Guo Li Kun was married to Guo Lin Danping, who successfully gave birth to 2 daughters, but because he was anxious for a son, he kept the mistress, who gave birth to a pair of opposite-sex twins that he then brought into the family. Guo Lin Danping was angry enough to die of a heart attack. The Guo family's grandparents, who were longing for a grandson, were ecstatic, without regard for Guo Lin Danping and her 2 daughters' feelings. They made the head of the family add the twins into the genealogical records. Guo Li Kun even personally educated the male twin, and now at the age of 20, the young man had already joined the board of directors, treated just like the next head of the Guo family. You could imagine how awkward Guo Shufang and her mother and sister's position in Guo family was. She went home to request help. The Guo family grandparents were soft-hearted, but Guo Li Kun was persuaded by his mistress and her 2 children to add a condition to Yang family, sell the contract for undersea tunnel project to them for the lowest price. This was no different than looting a burning house and throwing stones at someone who fell down a well. Guo Shufang wailed in anger, but she had no way out. In the end, her mother, Guo Lindamping, and her younger sister sold their jewelry to secretly slip her a few millions. Because of this, after her nephew fixed the shortage of funds, Guo Shufang went to the mall to buy up all the jewelry. This was only to compensate her mother and younger sister. In short, if there was no Lady Guo Lin Danping, Yang family and Guo family would have already become enemies. Guo Lin Danping, although already 60, had very good maintenance. Her figure was plentiful, her face was ruddy, she had a kind of serene older beauty. Guo Li Kun stood at her side, meeting the guests with a big smile. Yang family's car has arrived. Seeing the slowly approaching luxury car, Guo Li Kun's eyes lit up. Leading along the pair of boy-girl twins, he rushed towards the door to welcome them. Guo Lin Danping leaned on her littlest daughter's arm for support, unhurriedly following behind, her mouth rising in a slight, mocking curve. Yang Shenhai and his wife slowly walked over, accompanying a young man. The young man looked handsome, had a gentle temperament, and peach blossom eyes. When he looked at the people, the merciless would become passionate, deeply imprinting on hearts. When he looked at people, merciless would become passionate, deeply imprinting on hearts. This is our big nephew, really handsome. Guo Li Kun warmly exchanged greetings. He also tried to introduce the young twins to the young man. Zhou Yunsheng smiled faintly and nodded, bypassing the 3 to hold Guo Lin Danping's hand, saying, "I wish grandmother a happy birthday." Who was favored and who was unfavored was obvious at a glance. Why on earth are you standing here? Quick, go inside. Gu Shufang intimately held her nephew's hand and her mother's hand and went in. Guo Li Kun was very embarrassed, but he refused to let the opportunity slip by, quickly following behind with the twins. The arrival of these guests attracted all the other guests' raised eyebrows. They inwardly cited Guo family's lucky in-law connection. Yun Sheng, let me introduce you to. This is your cousin Guo Jinan. He's currently learning from me, but if you have free time, you're welcome to teach him. This is your cousin Guo Baoji. She's still attending B University, learning vocal music. Guo Likun was persistent in pushing the pair of twins to the young man's side. Guo Baoji smiled a bright and good-mannered smile, but Guo Jinan twisted his eyebrows, his eyes containing disgusted hostility. Shou Yunsheng glanced at him, smiled, and said, I hear you're good friends with Wen-ang? Nowadays, who didn't know the resentment between the three Zhou family brothers? Originally, outsiders thought that Zhou family's two illegitimate children had forced the eldest son into a dead end. Who would have guessed that the eldest son was actually an untouchable T-Rex? He just had to lift his foot and step, and the Zhou clan that the two illegitimate children had viciously fought over and worked so hard to win had been annihilated. So even if Zhou Yunsheng looked handsome and gentle, others couldn't ignore this way of killing decisively. Thinking of this, Guo Zinan's face slightly paled. Guo Likun, embarrassed, interfered. He's still small, his vision has not opened up, so it's inevitable that he'll make friends carelessly. There's this saying, a young person's mistake can always be forgiven. Zhou Yunsheng's smile turned even more gentle, commenting, young people do have the right to make mistakes, but not every one of these mistakes are worth the forgiveness. Mr. Gu, your words are not good. Always be strict with the younger generation. Don't indulge their mistakes. Otherwise, they'll end up like my younger brother Wen-ang. He'll be 50 years old after he gets out of prison. Even if he wants a do-over, he's already lost his chance. Isn't that true? On the surface, the Zhou group collapsed because of a series of economic crimes, but underneath the surface, who didn't know that the Zhou family's eldest son was behind it? The man only needed to move his hand to squeeze a colossus like the Zhou clan to death. Guo family's third-rate family wasn't even worth enough to play around with. Guo Zinan couldn't stop trembling. Guo Likun nodded in embarrassment while pulling out his handkerchief to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. Guo Lindanping and her daughters were calmly drinking and chatting as if they'd hear nothing, but in reality their hearts were very pleased. Just then there was a sound of repeated exclamation of alarm at the door. The Guo family members turned around to look, seeing a tall man slowly walk in. He wore an exquisitely tailored pure black suit. His chest pocket was decorated with a silver-gray handkerchief, and his hair was combed back, exposing a carved and chiseled handsome face. His long and narrow eyes concealed sharpness, very daunting. Today's Du family had already become the world's #1 arms dealer. After the family was integrated, Du Shulang was in control of all the power. Less and less people capable of threatening him existed, so these years he gradually appeared in the public eye more often. In Sea Country, most of the influential people were very familiar with his deeds, although he didn't understand why this otherworldly person showed up uninvited. Guo Likun still immediately put down his wine glass to greet him, enjoying the envious looks on his way over. But Du Shulang directly walked past him, opening up his arms towards the gentle smiling young man. Baby, why didn't you wait for me? I was accompanying my aunt to buy a birthday gift. Zhou Yunsheng gave him a hug, then handed him his glass, reaching to take another. Grandmother, happy birthday. Du Shulang let go of his lover and gently embraced Lady Guolin Danping. His intimate address made the receiving end somewhat mystified. Mr. Du, you and Yuncheng are. He's my boyfriend. Zhou Yuncheng carefully dropped the bomb, making Du Shulang laugh joyfully. He simply loved his companion's fearless and straightforward nature. If even the courage to recognize a lover was lacking, why continue walking shoulder to shoulder? In the end, Gulin Danping wasn't a mediocre person. After seeing her daughter's non-reaction, showing that she was already informed, she quickly restored her calm. But standing beside them, Guli Kun and his twins paled. Then they asked to be excused. The Noah group already had enough weight. If they added in Du conglomerate, this couple would simply be the world's strongest combination. Anyone who provoked them had a death wish. Thinking of his past behavior of hitting young family while it was down, Guli Kun regretted until his intestines were green. Catching sight of his mistress, hesitating in her original position, not daring to approach, he couldn't wait to slap her to death. Spectators connected the news of Du Conglomerate's upcoming cooperation with Noah Universal in the development of new weapons to what they were seeing, and exposed successive expression of realization. And as it turns out, Guo family had merely touched the edge of young family's light, nothing more. Long after Zhou and Jing arrived with his arms around a pure-looking girl, the current Zhongda group, after a series of setbacks, wasn't as large as before, and he'd lost his previous public attention. Outsiders described him with the bland and average word, promising junior. With someone like Zhou Yunsheng pressing him down from above, did his excellence matter? Seeing the two men intimately attached and drinking wine, Zhou Wenjing's eyes darkened. The girl at his side also exposed eyes of hatred. You seem to be your second uncle's daughter? Zhou Yunsheng gently swirled the wine in the cup. The girl was one of Wenjing's numerous harem members. Her family background was rather complicated. Her father was Du Shulang's second uncle, and he was originally the most likely to inherit Du conglomerate. But he was suppressed by Du Shulang after repeated confrontation between uncle and nephew. Deep hatred had long been sown, and each was anxious to quickly eliminate the other. Zhu Wenjing openly associating with this woman was equivalent to standing with Du Sulang's enemy. Du Sulang stared at them, but his nephew just nodded slightly, his attitude very cold. Du Sulang suddenly chuckled. It's my fault. I was too easygoing with him before. If it was the original development of fate, Du Sulang would easily forgive his nephew. Then, in a moment of inattentiveness, he be stabbed by the girl, causing serious injury. Zhou Wenjing killed the girl's father in revenge for his uncle. Not only did the nephew and uncle not drift apart, the relationship between them grew closer. Today's Du Sulang had a lover. His desire for familial love unconsciously faded away. Moreover, Zhou Wenjing and him had no blood relationship. What kind of close relative could he be regarded as? He defrauded Zhou Wenjing before, and he'd also helped him stabilize his situation. If not for Du Conglomerate's protection, Zhongda Group would have been carved up until almost nothing was left. Du Sulang was aware that he had invested more than enough in his nephew. He wasn't a holy father, conceding endless times, capacity for forgiveness lacking no bottom line. Since his nephew showed clear intention to part ways, he wouldn't urge him to stay. Thinking like this, Du Shulang raised his glass to his nephew, then drained it. Zhou Yunsheng was surprised to find that the progress bar on his AI had suddenly risen to 100%. He muttered to himself a bit, then found the reason. Du Shulang was Zhou Wenjing's biggest golden finger. Even if all his women were added up, their influence couldn't compare to Du Sulang. Because Du Sulang supported him, he could escape unscathed from all kinds of disasters. Now that Du Sulang had given up being his shield, if he someday met another crisis, it wouldn't be so easy to resolve. Of course, it was also now 100% impossible for him to achieve his fated achievements.
Changing the protagonist's fate was a shortcut to changing the world's trajectory. But unless the protagonist was actively harming him, Zhou Yunsheng wouldn't take the initiative to provoke them. Zhou Wenjing was cheated because he jumped into the trap by his own will. In addition to changing the protagonist's fate, Zhou Yunsheng could also change history, change technology, change the supporting roles, and his own fate, and other methods to damage the Lord God system. He didn't need to fight to the death with the protagonist. But it was undeniable that Duke Sulang's decision helped him save a lot of time, and also helped him avoid a lot of trouble. His mood suddenly happier, Zhou Yunsheng hooked his arms around Duke Sulang's neck, kissed his cheeks. "Thank you, dear. You've done me a big favor." Du Sulang stared blankly, then he reacted, grabbing the back of his head and exchanging a deep kiss. Also, he secretly slipped a ring onto his left ring finger. The guests stared slack-jawed. Some even cried out in alarm. The next day, the two business giants' sex scandal spread all over the nation, but the public relations team on both sides didn't come out to quell the news. Chapter 11. Du Sulang was only one when his mother threw him at the door of an orphanage. At that time, he was still small, so his memory was limited. He didn't even remember the woman's appearance. He didn't know who his father was. The only thing the woman left him was a name and a black raven tattoo on his left shoulder. Later, he found out that this raven was a symbol of J Country's largest underworld organization, the conglomerate. The orphanage wasn't a good place. There wasn't enough food. There was a constant increase in abandoned children crying piteously for food. Usually, in order to compete for cold steamed bun, they could break each other's bones. From age 1 to age 5, his body was always scarred, his stomach was always rumbling, and his heart was always hazy. But in that immoral place there was one ray of sunshine, illuminating him, allowing him to grit his teeth and support each day. That person was named Fang Nian Yu. She was 10 years older than him and always meticulously cared for him. Even though she was also starving, she would leave him her last bite of food. Du Sulang didn't know how warm a mother's embrace felt, but with Fang Nian Yu there, he felt like he'd already experienced it. In his last year at the orphanage, a woman named Lady Yang donated a lot of money and sent new clothes and toys to all the orphans on New Year's Eve. Fang Yanyo got a pink jacket. She wore it in front of him and spun around, saying how grateful she was to Lady Yang. He got a Transformers, something he'd always wanted. He'd even thought to steal money from the dean's office to buy it. Now that someone had sent it to him, he was naturally very happy. Almost every night he slept with it in his arms. Not long after, Du family sent someone to find him. Du Sulang happily followed them to J Country. He thought that this was the beginning of his happy life, but he'd unknowingly stepped into hell. Du family children with no ability had only one way out: death. His brothers tore into each other like mad dogs, like insect larvae fighting for the soul's opportunity to live. On those countless ice-cold, reeking of blood nights, Fang Yan Yu's smile grew more and more vibrant, and his only toy had long been forgotten in the corner. When he finally secured the position of Du family's head, he at least had a chance to breathe. So he decided to put down all official business and traveled to Sea Country to find his loved ones. What he found was Fang Yan Yu's son, Zhou Wenjing, in a small, messy clinic. He was beaten up, his nose was broken, and his pair of dark eyes were cloudy, not a trace of sunshine. Fang Yan Yu was the kind of woman who laughed, even when facing adversities. Why did his son become like this? Duke Sulang was angry, and with Zhou Wenjing's account, his anger turned into overwhelming hostility.
He didn't expect Fang Yanyu hadn't committed suicide because she was suffering from depression. In fact, she was harassed to death, dying in that harasser's bathtub. He didn't have to personally witness it. He could imagine the red and tragic scene. The Zhou family was truly wicked. He didn't try to persuade his nephew to leave with him. Since Zhou family treated his nephew so cruelly, he decided to help his nephew take over all of Zhou family. With a malicious but also mocking mind, he concealed his identity and accepted a job at Zhou clan. Soon won over Zhou Hao's trust. As a personal assistant, he had the qualifications to enter and leave the Zhou family's house. He began to secretly observe the other two Zhou family sons. Zhao Yunsheng was the oldest son. His character appeared very calm and his studies was always ranked among the best. Zhou Wen'ang was 2 months younger than Wenjing. The youngest had a lively and cheerful personality and was most liked by Zhou Hao. Wenjing and Zhao Wen'ang had an okay relationship, but with Zhou Yunsheng it was like fire and water. But in Du Shulang's view, Zhou family's 2 children were not worthy. One's method were clumsy and the other was honey-mouthed but black-hearted. They both had some smarts but no wisdom. On the contrary, Wenjing had a strong, forbearing character and a clever and sober mind, a foundation for something great. Du Sulang decided to take this lump of unpolished jade and sculpt it into a dazzling work of art. In the process of teaching, Zhou Yunsheng's frequently bullying made him very angry, making him want to teach the child a little lesson. But conversely, that child resolutely gave him a wake-up slap. If he hadn't harshly criticized him, if he hadn't shown his deep-seated hatred, maybe he would have never thought that Fang Yanyu's suicide wasn't a retaliation, but an atonement. His impression of Fang Yanyu's every moment was with a gentle smile. She was virtuous and beautiful. How could she be a bloodied, malicious spirit filled with bottomless hatred? He seemed to be wrong about the cause and effect, and also gravely mistaken. Until that moment, he'd never linked that Lady Yang who gave him a New Year's gift to Zhou Yunsheng's mother. He'd never investigated Zhou family. He should have realized, but it was as if a layer of fog was blinding his eyes, causing him to not see anything besides hate. But as Zhou Yunsheng said, did he and Wenjing have the qualifications to hate? The one who should hate was him all along. Perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of compensation. From that moment, he started wholeheartedly taking care of Zhou Yunsheng and secretly following all his actions. Slowly he learned that Zhou Yunsheng hated eating carrots, and when bored he'd caress his wrists. He was very proficient with the computer, and every day before going to bed he'd drink a glass of milk. He knew every little detail and small habit about his life, but he ignored the consequences such excessive concern could bring. In the end, Zhou Wen'ang acted against Wenjing, but Wenjing poured his hatred and rage on Yunsheng's head instead. Because of this, Du Sulang was very displeased. The more he paid attention to Yunsheng, the more he understood the forbearance and strength hidden under his impulsive character. Compared to him, Wenjing seemed pretty mediocre. He couldn't even find his real enemy. In the future, how could he move forward alone? And Du Shulang didn't alert him. Only people who have stumbled could learn to step over obstacles. He left Wenjing's room and then inexplicably arrived at Yunsheng's room door. They were separating soon. He unexpectedly felt some reluctance to part. Whenever Du Shulang thought he understood enough about the boy, he'd always bring him a greater surprise. He found out his strong cover-up and discovered the relationship between Wenjing's mother and himself. He also indirectly showed him his outstanding means and impartial attitude. Compared to Wenjing, who was still waiting to be sculpted, he was a ray of light, already ready to blossom. Du Sulang was brimming with expectations for his future, and it was more intense than his expectation for the fully cultivated Wenjing. He sent several bodyguards to secretly protect him, making them send back his movements and photos every other week. His concerns for him gradually formed into a type of habit. On this birthday he came back to his empty, quiet room, reeking of cologne and booze, and accidentally opened an email with a photo of Yunqiang.
The boy was holding a chocolate ice cream cone. He'd stretched the tip of his tongue out to lick up a bead of sweetness. He seemed to have sensed that someone was secretly taking a photo of him. His long and narrow peach blossom eyes casting a sidelong glance, his lazy gaze containing hidden vigilance. That charming look, hooking heart and soul, passed through the computer screen to pierce Du Shulang's heart, his breath quickening. He foolishly stared at the screen for a long time. Then he finally called the boy. "Are you free? Can we video chat?" he requested, eager to see his face. The youth agreed. Hearing that today was his birthday, the youth thought about it, then opened up the music box on his desk. Using many rivets and screws, he assembled it into a transformer, only taking about half an hour. His expression was focused, his flexible fingers seemed as if they were creating another wonderful, brilliant world. Du Shulang unknowingly gawked too long, so the screen went into sleep mode, and only then did he snap out of the intense throbbing. The youth was very attentive, apparently noticing how much Du Shulang liked this gift. The next day, he sent an express package to the company. After opening the package, Du Shulang couldn't help but laugh. He played with it for a long time, before carefully placing it on the desk. Then, before leaving work, he carefully packed it into his briefcase to bring it back home. He first put it on a bookshelf, but felt that he couldn't see it at a glance, so he put it on his desk again. Then, before going to bed, he thought about it again and finally placed it on his bedside table. It was the second toy he received in his life, and it was his first birthday gift. He loved it. His contact with the juvenile gradually increased. As long as he was free, he would video call him, anxiously waiting for the youth's handsome face to appear at the other end. The boy was very busy. Even when on the phone, he was still writing programs. If Du Shulang didn't speak, he would be immersed in his own world, forgetting everything around him. In order to watch him longer, Du Shulang frequently, deliberately remained silent, then fascinatedly stared at the boy's earnest profile. He could watch him for hours without getting bored. His gaze was occasionally interrupted by an assistant or a secretary. But when he came back, after dealing with work, he found the boy still quietly sitting in the same position, his flexible fingers tapping the keyboard. It seemed like he would always be there, waiting for him to return. Du Shulang's heart jumped at the sudden idea. But gradually things went beyond his control. After inadvertently getting a glimpse of a flexible waist, slender straight legs, and a vague outline of a back, he would unexpectedly toss and turn in his sleep. After falling asleep with great difficulty, he'd wake up to the thrill of bone-eroding ecstasy. The throbbing in his body and heart couldn't fool anyone. After looking through the photos he'd collected over the years, he started to chase with almost no hesitation. Initially with a give-it-a-try attitude, soon with cautiousness and earnestness. Then only he took care of him. He'd sunk into a quagmire of love and couldn't escape, but he was suffering gladly. Sea Country Federal Prison. Zhou Wenjing was sitting in front of the visiting window, anxiously smoking, when a patrolling prison guard came over and snapped at him to snuff it out. He thought of Zhou Yunsheng, who was always fond of ordering his uncle to put out his cigarettes. Uncle would always compromise with a slightly helpless and joyful expression. He obviously enjoyed being ordered around by Zhou Yunsheng. Zhou Wenjing pinched off his cigarette with a sneer. At this time, a skinny, black-faced man was escorted by prison guards to the seated. If it wasn't for his tag reading Zhou Wen'ang, Zhou Wenjing would have almost not recognized that this person was the once high-spirited Zhou family third son. How are you doing? Zhou Wenjing dully asked, but the other side didn't answer. He continued speaking. Today, Zhou Yuncheng and Du Shulang are getting married. In a few days, you should be able to see the news reports on the television. This finally got a reaction. Weeping bitter tears, he yelled, Wenjing, please speak to Big Brother for me. Let him get me out. I know I was wrong. As long as he's willing to get me out, even if he wants me to be his slave, I'd do it. Wenjing, please help me. I can't stand it anymore. These people are simply not human. They've exhausted every means to torture me. Zhou Wenjing didn't have the patience to listen any longer. He growled in dissatisfaction. You want to compromise like this? You want to give up like this? Zhou Wen'ang, you're really fucking useless. Throwing away the hand set, Zhou Wenjing strode out of the prison. His stuffy chest not only didn't ease up, it actually became heavier. Over the years, his sailing hasn't been very smooth. Without Du Sulang's protection, he no longer felt omnipotent in the business world. Instead, because of his hostility with Zhou Yuncheng, he was ridiculed by everyone and often crowded out and suppressed. He thought about fighting back, but clashing with Noah Group, that colossal, was tantamount to striking a stone with an egg. Not to mention that the other side had Du conglomerate's backing. A few days ago, he tried to bid for a project with the Noah subsidiary company, but after the bidding opened, his secretary sold it at a base price to a company that was hostile to him. Before the war started, he had already suffered a crushing defeat. He never felt so small, so helpless. Those words he'd said wasn't scolding Zhou Wen'ang, he was scolding himself. In this life, he would never be able to catch up to Zhou Yuncheng. Deep inside, he had the feeling he wasn't supposed to be so useless. Zhou Yuncheng's current position should have been his. He wondered what made the world get so defective.